Hello? I got it, Sheila. I just switched. All right. Welcome to the special meeting of the Governing Board, public hearing on Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. I will call the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. Please let the record reflect that Mrs. Ordway, Mrs. Fisher, and Mrs. O'Brien are here for the meeting. Mrs. Paperman and Mrs. Reed are not in attendance. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. I have a motion for public hearing for fiscal year 2021-2022 expenditure revision number 2.
So moved.
So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. We're in a special hearing for this evening, and we will go to Mrs. Mock.
President O'Brien, members of the board, and guests in person and online. We have a brief presentation for the public hearing for revision number 2 of our 2021-2022 expenditure budget. We'll start with just a little bit of history and where we are now. The budget was originally previewed and proposed in June of 21, officially adopted in July of 21. It was adopted on draft forms as the legislature had not finalized the budget for this fiscal year. So in a rarity, we had our first revision in September of 21. And that was merely for the fact of moving it to the official budget forms for the school year. This revision number 2 is required by the 15th of May each year, and it's to finalize the budget based on our most current anticipated final student counts for the year. We always like to remind everyone at this time that we will not know our final student counts until July of 22. So this really is our best educated guess of our average daily membership based on our enrollment and ADM as reported from the state throughout the school year. If there are any changes in our ADM following the budget revision today, they will be accounted for in budget adjustments to our 22 and 23 budget. Some of this may be a preview of what's to come for next budget year as well. We may see some of these timelines. So for our final budget revision, here are the changes that we will see in the budget forms. Just a slight decrease to our Prop 123 funding. And this is just finalization of the distribution across the state equalizing it appropriately based on student enrollment for the year. We did, thanks to our increase in student enrollment over this current school year, we did see an increase in our district additional assistance and our M&O override from our projected and adopted budget. Want to draw your attention to the fourth item in line here, the FY21 post-budget revision adjustment, $811,000. That does seem like a lot of funds and would not be typical for us. These funds are specifically for what we projected in our AOI enrollment. AOI enrollment is based not only on the number of students and the aggregate amount of time that they AOI program, but also based on the number of minutes they submit. And not knowing exactly where that would land at the end of last year, we aimed very high based on enrollment, but enrollment, not being quite the same as average daily membership. And I want to point out as well that we planned for this. We knew that there might be adjustments, and so when we adopted our 22 budget, we had $7.5 million that we actually did not allocate, and so this slight adjustment of $811,000 is well covered in the $7.5 million that we left for such instances as this. We did see an increase in our FY21 projected carry forward of $3.59 million. Thanks to our increase in enrollment from projection, we did see an increase in our Group A funding of almost $3.4 million. And with some of our students coming back, including our special education students, and a very small but brand new portion of our Group B weight is our gifted funding, which is a weight of 0.007 for all of our gifted students. So that $1.8 million does include probably about $100,000 in that gifted funding. So all in all, for FY22, we do have an increase from our adopted budget of about $8.3 million. Most of these funds will be accounted for as carry forward and used as part of the 23 budget adoption process, which will begin next month. And that is all I have, but being this is a public hearing, we will take any questions from the board and also take an opportunity to call to the public for anyone who would like to ask questions specifically about the 21-22 budget as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Mock. So this is a public hearing, so if there is anybody from the public who wishes to specifically address the 2021-2022 expenditure budget revisions, this would be your opportunity to do so. And so it looks and sounds like we have nobody to speak from the public, so I will accept a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
So moved.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. The public hearing is adjourned at 7:10 p.m. So we will now convene the Deer Valley Unified School District Regular Governing Board meeting on Tuesday, May 10th, 2022 at 7:11 p.m. Please let the record reflect that Mrs. Fisher, Mrs. Ordway, and Mrs. O'Brien are here, and is Mrs. Paperman on telephonically? Okay. Mrs. Reed and Mrs. Paperman are absent this evening. If you would please stand if you are able to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
In a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously if I go to board docs to vote. Sorry, not in the right meeting. Okay. All right, some technical difficulties. So we will start this evening with our district reports. Our first report is the finance report. Mrs. Mock.
Good evening again, President O'Brien, members of the board, and guests. This evening, we will start with the enrollment report for the month ending April of 2022. Very on track with what we've been reporting for the last couple of months for our monthly enrollment reports. We ended April with an increase in enrollment from 1.4% over projection. We have, of course, been comparing this to the last non-COVID year, which was 2018-2019. We do still remain 3.4% below that enrollment from the same time in the 2018-2019 school year, but again, up over the same time last year. And I will take any questions about the enrollment report.
Members, any questions about the enrollment report? Okay, no, you can move on to your next report.
Our next report is the M&O budget report, also for the month ending of April 2022. We're projecting a slight increase to our potential carry forward. We had been reporting about $19 million. We've upticked to about $20.3 million. That does not include any of the budget additions that will come of the approval of the revised expenditure budget for 21-22. Those will be represented on the next M&O budget report. It does include a substantial savings in the M&O budget specifically for staffing and vacancy positions in both certified and classified. We are seeing a slight increase due to inflation in both our school spending and our district and transportation department spending. Part of the school budgets that you will see that is over their specific budget is actually the schools paying for extra time and overtime for some of their classified staff. So their budgets actually will receive a budget adjustment from us, and it is really an offset to some of those vacancy savings. So we actually expect the school budgets will be to the good by the time we finish making those budget adjustments for them by the end of the school year. And any of that additional budget that they recoup, we're going to be moving pretty much from the salary lines where we've had those vacancies. But we will use this information as we begin planning or continue planning for the budget for next year as well. And when we see the report next month, we will include any of that additional budget capacity that we will realize from the budget revision approval this evening. And with that, I will take any questions about the M&O budget report.
Questions? Okay, no questions. Thank you, Mrs. Mock. Oops. Our next report is the part 2 of the Futures Report update, and for that we will go to Dr. Zurbach.
Thank you very much, President O'Brien. Good evening again, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. It is certainly our pleasure this evening to continue with our Futures update. At the last board meeting, you will recall in part 1 that we provided much context for the work that we are doing with respect to the Futures Report. We provided relevant history. We talked about the work that has been done with the 4 work teams. And we have also talked to you about the work that so many stakeholders have been doing and the input that they have provided. Tonight in part 2, you will once again hear about the work from these work teams. However, tonight you will hear more about the future work that these work teams will be doing. This next slide captures at a high level the broad topics that we'll be covering. And then with that, I will pass the baton to Dr. Galligan, who will begin with our academic focus. Dr. Galligan.
President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. This is just a continuation of the academic focus work from the last meeting. If you remember last meeting, we spent a great deal of time on multi-tier systems of support. This evening, we're going to talk quickly about transitions in bridging and co-teaching. When we look at transitions and bridging, and Gary, if you'll just click that slide, if you look on the, and I'm kind of channeling my Jim font, on the left side, you'll see these are the recommendations from the Futures Report, and on the right side, these are the next steps from our developmental preschool department and then transition from school to work. And the general gist of our preschool transitions and bridging really was, let's review our documents, make sure they are accurate and that they give the best way for us to transition our developmental preschool children from a preschool program with few kids and many adults to a kindergarten classroom with many more kids and, in general, a single adult or a single adult with para support. So it was looking at that mainly, and then providing opportunities for our developmental preschool families to visit the school where their child will be attending, to see the kindergarten and have their child just see what a kindergarten classroom looks like, the teacher to meet the kindergarten teacher. Those are just a few of those, and Janet Zeke and her team are working on those action steps and have been working on those action steps actually since this report was developed. Then we will look at our high school, the transition from school to work. That would be our youth who are exiting our system as seniors and going into work. The work that we do with them in their junior and senior years, really it was how do we ensure that the TSW program and classrooms are actually preparing our children to be successful outside of our system in a workforce situation. So some of the work that the TSW teachers and leader are working on is just making sure that we've identified the specific needs from children who have exited our system, as well as needs of our current children to see what they would like to do once they graduate, and then also do a post-school outcomes data dive, and that just means for us to check in with the kids who have exited our system and make sure that the TSW program that they participated in was valuable and it led them to an opportunity for work outside of a graduation. So that's what's going on in transitions and bridging, and we're just very excited about that. When we look at the co-teaching recommendations, you can look on the left side. These were the recommendations from the Futures Report. I will say that the team talked long and hard about co-teaching because at its heart, I believe the whole team that was participating in the academic focus believes strongly in the positive outcomes for co-teaching. However, the team made the decision to pause on moving forward with co-teaching at this moment because we identified two very distinct logistical problems, obstacles. One of them is the logistics of finding time to co-plan. So co-teaching can only be successful when there is time for the two teachers to come together to plan. And when we look at where our special education staff is, where our gen ed teachers are, and the gaps that we sometimes have with special education teacher staff, just we don't have all the staff that we need. Having times for them to come together and plan is very, very difficult. And then having those consistent structures to collaborate. So not only do we need to come together and plan, but that collaboration after instruction occurs, how do we work with kids moving forward? And then the second one, not quite as important, but just as big, is the shared ownership. So having our special education teachers being seen as equal educators in the classroom by students, families, and colleagues, and then adapting, I teach this way, Melissa teaches that way. How do we merge our instructional style so that we can be effective for all kids? So right now, at this time, we are pausing on those co-teaching recommendations, not losing them, but pausing at least for the next 2 years, and then we'll come back again and take a look at where we might be in our system at that point in time. So we just wanted to let you know that. That next slide is one that I shared with you before. So with the multi-tier systems of support, and part of the report tonight is really about human capital. And so we wanted to talk just a bit about our proposal for MTSS-A, academics, and MTSS-B, behavior. So we would like to maintain our current person who is dedicated to MTSS-A. She's a specialist. She oversees all of our tier 1, 2, and 3, as well as all the programs and working with teachers, working with administrators. We would like to add a 1.0 FTE for an MTSS academic K-12 math intervention specialist. So we don't necessarily have that person that is focused on intervention, Tier 2, and Tier 3 remediation. We would also like to reorganize a current literacy coach position that we have in CIA to become an MTSS-A grade 3 through 12 reading intervention specialist. So someone who is targeting not only our primary kids, but all the way up through 12th grade for those students and youth who have struggled with reading and capturing those skills as they come into high school and are in high school and exit our system. So then we would also, and Gary has talked about this in the past, reorganize a Title IV behavior position to become an MTSS-B specialist position. So if you have looked at our strategic plan and you've read the Futures Report, multi-tier systems of support really are the foundation of the work that we do in PLCs and teacher collaboration around those 4 questions. So we feel that making these additions and reorganization will help us continue to move forward to support kids. This is one of those strategies that we are putting in place and have put in place for mitigation of COVID-19, loss of learning, lots of learning opportunities, and then ongoing gaps that some of our children have from kindergarten all the way through high school. Thank you.
Good evening, Governing Board, Dr. Finch, and community members. I'm going to discuss future planning for the Behavior Service Delivery Work Team. And again, this was facilitated by Dr. Zurbach and myself. As you may remember from our last board meeting, we talked about a continuum of service delivery. And so one of the stops on the continuum of service delivery was something we are calling the Positive Intervention Classroom, AKA the PIC classroom. And so this Positive Intervention Classroom, we are going to focus on our primary grade levels. This is for a K-3 intervention. So as Dr. Galligan referred to MTSS, this certainly is a level of intervention that we feel would provide support to our incoming kindergarten students and some of our elementary students that may require more intensive supports and behavioral frameworks. The Positive Intervention Classroom expansion, we'd like to talk about not only the primary application, but perhaps a secondary application. Because intervention is not just for students that are in K-3. We certainly know that intervention would be beneficial to some of our students in secondary settings. So what we are working on and proposing for the upcoming school year is having a positive intervention classroom for our K-3 students. This would be the inaugural year where we would start to collect data sets. Was the PIC classroom beneficial? Were the transitions supported? Were the students returning to the campus with the supports required so they would not have any recidivism or return to the PIC classroom? And so we will be collecting data as we go into this inaugural year for our first PIC classroom. As well, we are proposing a potential positive intervention classroom for a secondary campus, and we are currently in consultation with one of our high school principals and teams to see if this would be also a successful endeavor for the upcoming school year. And as we propose to move forward with our PIC or positive intervention classrooms, as we look to upcoming school years, we would hope by 2025 we would have a positive intervention classroom for our K-3 students in each one of our regions. So we could, by 2025, have 5 positive intervention classrooms for our elementary students and possibly commensurate 5 positive intervention classrooms for our secondary. I also wanted to invite Jackie DeTore, who is part of our principal advisory work team, to talk about the upcoming benefits that she sees in a positive intervention classroom from her perspective as a principal. Jackie?
Thank you. Good evening, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch, everyone that's listening. This classroom is going to be very beneficial to, as we've talked about before, that early intervention for behavior. And we've talked about how we know with academics that we've done that, and so with behaviors we need to do the same thing because behaviors have to be taught, and we've all learned that the hard way. So what this will do for us is give us that additional step. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that at every campus, we already provide interventions and supports for students, and we go through the different levels and the trials and tribulations of campus level interventions to do what we can. And then there are a few students who require something more. This would give that opportunity for schools to have another avenue to reach out to give students that more intensive intervention. So we see this as a very positive thing, especially, I'm just going to keep emphasizing in those early years. And then having it regionally, getting to that point, will, of course, and make it more, it will feel like it's more accessible because even I myself think one room for an entire district, how's that going to work? But it's, as we said, we need to start somewhere, we need to get some data. But then having it regionally, what that does, the region principals meet every month. We, have some unique needs in our regions. We discuss those. So knowing that we have a classroom that is for our region, and we can also give it some guidance in what we see are more specific needs to what our students. So, for example, the region I'm in, the Deer Valley High School region, we may have some needs that are different than the Mountain Ridge region, just by the nature of our populations. So that is what I think is going to be positive about it. So,
Thank you, Jackie. Next, we want to discuss service delivery. Again, this was at our prior board meeting where we talked about other stops on the continuum for service delivery, including a specialized learning center that may grow and/or sprout into a specialized regional program as we move forward in our timeline in 2023, 24, and so on. Before we start to drill down into these two specific domains, I do want to invite Mrs. Moffett to discuss the next slide, as she and I have been meeting with our principal leaders and school teams to talk about different options for service delivery as we move forward next year. Mrs. Moffett?
Good evening, President O'Brien, Governing Board members, and Dr. Finch. As Dr. McCusker mentioned, we have been holding a variety of meetings with our principals and with our SESs in anticipation of moving into new areas of our service delivery continuum. As you are aware, the Futures Group did come through and made some recommendations based off of many interviews that they held. There was a common theme that arose in those interviews, and we noticed it is also a common theme and has been for quite some time among our administration and our certified staff. You're aware that we do perform exit surveys and in some cases exit interviews, and in those platforms we did learn the similar information to what the Futures Group learned, and that's that at our K-6 and K-8 campuses, the stability of those locations and being able to provide the services that we needed to in our changing environment, it was more difficult than it was in the middle schools and the high schools. So to provide some context, in a middle school and a high school, if you think of a special education teacher's day, it is fairly predictable. They know where they are going to go for first hour, second hour, third hour, fourth hour, and so on. They know what they're planning for, and their service load is going to be fairly predictable as the year goes by. In a K-6 and a K-8 environment, a variety of models are utilized because a teacher can be providing services to a kindergarten student, can be providing services to an 8th grade student in all content areas and for all needs. That can also change based on a student moving in or out. Their day could look different from week to week. And that did cause some frustration. Also, over the last decade and a half, we, I think, did quite a beautiful job trying to provide the full continuum of services at our locations. And but as Futures came in and we collected information, we realized that we really did need some more support in the area of behavior, and that's what Jackie just spoke to, and also Dr. McCusker. So what we did with our administrators is we brought them together and provided them a landscape history. Not all of our administrators have been with us during the last 15 years in our journey in special education and the significant changes that we have made. So we provided that historic review, including the transitions that we took from campus to campus and where we believe we're going to be going and our goals for moving forward. So we did review delivery models just to ensure that each principal had a common understanding of the allowable delivery models at a locations and no misconceptions if any of those administrators had been with us for around a decade, that there were many models that they could be using. Reminded them of all the legal allowances that teachers and general education teachers can take providing services to students with IEP. We reviewed the immediate and future staffing implications for next year, looking at the current certified manual ratio of 1:15, and as we look into the future, adjusting into new models and comparing with other districts and their models, and looking back even to the ratios that we used prior to the model that we're under right now, our human capital team is reviewing what that could look like moving forward. But we did communicate with each SES and each principal what their staffing will look like next year and how they should be adjusting to meet the needs of their students to provide a more stable environment for students on IEPs, master scheduling implications, and then also all the variety of grouping models that they can utilize at a grade level.
Thank you, Mrs. Moffett. And to dig a little deeper into different supports and different ways to look at service, I am going to ask Mr. Galletti for his perspective as a site principal and some strategies that he will utilize at Sierra Verde. Mr. Galletti?
There we go, round two. I'll skip the solo this time. Good evening, President O'Brien, members of the board. We again thank you for taking the time to kind of get a ground level view of the futures report and implementation that I know has been near and dear to all campus principals always, but I think even more with more urgency in the last year and a half or so. And I know there is a great appetite to move forward with a lot of these recommendations and excuse me, what's being shared this evening. And I think to kind of sum it up for those that don't always speak all of the educational lingo and understand all the acronyms, we are basically looking at how can we be more creative and evolve and adopt new realities as the challenges are changing. And as Dr. McCusker and Ms. Moffett said, with sometimes older practices that have been kind of drilled into a lot of us in Deer Valley because that has been our standard practice in the past, we're now looking at needing to kind of update and provide more options for kids and get them the support and the services they need. And as Jackie spoke to earlier, each region we kind of, in each campus, but certainly each region, we have unique needs. And though our needs may be different than the Deer Valley region, they're still just as pressing. So we are asking for more support and more options and more classrooms to put in place to get kids what they need so that they can be successful here in Deer Valley and get the support they need. And we know this year and moving forward, it's challenging with manpower, finding the people. Special education can be a very thankless job and a very challenging and trying job as well. And we see that with our vacancies. I, it's very important that I think the whole community understands that everybody in this room, whether they're special ed background or not, has really stepped in on all campuses across the community to step in, district office people included. Everyone in this room has been on campuses, on Zoom meetings, filling in for admin roles, and everyone is doing their part, from our para-professional staff who are supporting our kids, being way outmanned, and they're doing everything in their power. And our special ed coordinators, our general ed teachers, and our administrators, everyone is doing what needs to be done to make sure we're always putting the needs of kids first. But we are now reaching that tipping point where we're burning ourselves out from every position, classified, certified, administrative, and so forth. So we are looking at how can we make systemic changes that will allow our teachers and our specialists to be more successful. So getting these positive intervention classrooms and these specialized regional programs will really help us have options for kids, and also options where we can put staff who want to work with our most challenging kids in those classrooms, working with our most difficult students and making sure they can really focus on those kids and give them what they need. And I can speak to like Sierra Verde again from my lens. We've had a campus this year where we've had 40 students on IEPs come to us since August of last year that we had no idea this time last year were coming. And with a staff of 6 service coordinators, we had everything all mapped out in May, and it looked great on paper. And then as our needs and challenges evolved, anytime a student comes to our school with an IEP, we're obviously obligated to meet those services in those minutes. And sometimes we just felt like we remapped almost weekly, and we ran out of physical space, we ran out of people. But again, people stepped up and did what was necessary. But it's been trying on our staff, and some of our staff feel like they are having to be such wide generalists that they can't do any one or two things well enough, and they don't feel they're always in the position to succeed structurally. So I know from the principal lens, that's common for all of our campuses, is we're looking at how can we get more options and more support to kids to make sure they're getting what they need, that they stay in Deer Valley, with the specialists and the people that can move them and grow them the most.
Thank you, Mr. Galetti. And as we look at more specialization, for the upcoming school year 2022-2023, we will continue to expand upon specialized learning centers. As we discussed at the last board meeting, a specialized learning center is just that. It's a learning center that provides specialized instruction. The students in a specialized learning center may not have been successful in what we refer to as a typical learning center in Deer Valley Unified School District. So with this lens, we believe that if we can provide more specialized instruction, that this will actually reduce the referrals to outside placements. In other words, it is very important that we keep our students on IEPs as close to their home school and as close to district services as possible. So with this more expansive specialization, it will provide more opportunities to keep our students in district, and that's something we want. So Student Support Services and our BAT team, which is our Behavior Autism Assistance team, will support in setting up the following: the learning environments, the communication systems, and the behavioral systems within these specialized learning centers. As we move forward into 2023 and beyond, the specialized learning centers will be developed or sprouted into regionalized programs throughout the district. This, of course, will always be based upon student need. Students may remain at their home school if there is a regional program located at that school, or they may require to transition to a regional program that could best meet their needs.
This particular slide captures the importance of all of our district departments working to meet the need of behavior. Again, as it was highlighted in the Futures Report and continues to be vocalized by our school leaders and our teachers. One of the pieces that is critically important is this notion of aligning our systems with MTSS. Dr. Galligan spoke about that briefly in a prior slide, and Jen Miner will now address this in more detail in the upcoming slide.
Good evening, President O'Brien, Dr. Finch, and members of the board. I'm happy to be here to share a little framework that we've been using to build a knowledge of MTSS. Building the knowledge of MTSS is important because we know that when students' behavioral, emotional, and social needs are met, they're better able to excel in school and in life. With the guidance of the book, Behavior Solutions, our hope is to provide a framework of support so that students are better equipped and have the knowledge that is needed to take action to build multi-tiered systems of support. The book Behavior Solutions outlines how to utilize the PLC at work and the RTI at work processes that our schools are already familiar with to create a three-tiered system of support that is collaborative, research-based, and practical. The book Behavior Solutions outlines that a systemic behavior gap exists in schools when a breakdown of one or more of 5 key components is missing. This year, we've been learning about those 5 components by providing training to our principals in level meetings, and those components are communication, collaboration, coordination, capacity building, and collective ownership. As you can see on the slide, we created a behavior solutions team, which is made up of some very talented principals. We have a PBIS coordinator that understands PBIS, an intervention CIA specialist, and a behavior coordinator from Student Support Services. So we've really tried to wrap in all of our departments and our principal administrators to build this plan and deliver this framework. The other thing that we're doing is we're providing some training on the 3 critical teams which you'll see is the guiding coalition, knowledge of teacher teams, and knowledge of intervention team, and how at the campus level, they all need to work together to deliver the framework. That is all that we've been doing this year. Moving on to next year, we'll be refining systems for Tier 1. So we'll be really looking at classroom prevention by using the guiding coalition at each school site. That is really the leadership team to help develop school-wide language and expectations for behavior. We know that that's very important, that when students know how to act and what is expected of them, they're able to be just more successful. We also are doing some school-wide teaching of important academic and social behaviors. Our principals are learning about academic behaviors and the importance of those and how they relate to social behaviors. We also are giving them knowledge about teacher teams, as I mentioned, and their role in behavior management, and establishing a communication system between the guiding coalition and teacher teams. It's important that these teams at our campuses communicate regularly so that just-in-time resources can be provided. And then in year 3, years 2023, 2024, we'll be looking at refinement of Tier 2. Tier 2 supports focus on providing students with additional time, support, and reteaching opportunities that they need to master the skills, knowledge, and behaviors that are essential for a student's future success. So we'll be really looking at monitoring Tier 2, providing training and support in that level of intervention, and overall just developing a shared understanding of tiered interventions for behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. We believe with this particular plan, especially next year with the refinement of Tier 1, that we will be meeting the school's needs in terms of where they're at. We will be having many new staff members at our school next year. And so it is critically important that our teachers have that solid foundation for Tier 1, because we know if that's not present, it's hard to have Tiers 2 and 3 if there's not a solid Tier 1. Even today, I had a conversation with Principal DeTore about how she is thinking about her Tier 1 next year. So Jackie, could you perhaps talk a little bit more about our conversation today in terms of how you are looking at PBIS next year and strengthening your Tier 1, and then how this support potentially could help your campus?
Yes, thank you. So we are, I'm in a kind of unique situation. I'm in year 2 of being at a particular campus. We're also moving into, we have uh, more teachers retiring this year, so I've already been filling those positions with other staff. So we're going to have quite a changeover of staff. So it's time for us as a school culture to take a good hard look at um, our PBIS structure, which is our overarching overall plan for the campus. So we're going to spend some time. We're going to do a little work in June, thanks to Title I that supports that with some funds. I'm able to bring the team in, and a team that exists across the whole campus. So representation across the campus, which is so important. And then we're going to go back to doing a little bit of training, bringing in the what I know from the Behavior Solutions book and the work that's been presented to me, and bringing that to them, looking at what we need with building our rules and expectations campus wide, and continuing from there, kind of foundational for ourselves, and working on that, building that. And then that will set us up very well to continue with what um, is presented right here, as far as moving into getting that Tier 1 um, really strong, so that as we move into the Tier 2 supports, and embedding that through our PLCs, and having our guiding coalition and our other team members helping to monitor that process, I'm very excited about it, actually, is what I talked about a lot, is that it's going to be a very exciting time at Arrowhead for all the staff. They don't know that quite yet, but they will.
Thank you, Jackie. Tony, perhaps you could add on a bit too in terms of how you see the plan from your perspective. It is likely, I would guess, that the turnover is smaller in terms of teacher staff at your school, but I do know from looking at the data that overall we know that some of our behaviors are up. Regardless of the demographics in the school. And so the focus on Tier 1 is likely beneficial for all. So perhaps you could add a few thoughts from your perspective.
Yes, and much like Jackie just spoke to, we know it's always good practice to review and revise and look at the data at the successes and the areas for growth year to year. And though we don't necessarily have as much turnover this year, we're fortunate to retain the majority of our teaching staff. It's always good for us to revise. And we actually at Sierra Verde had a guiding coalition meeting this morning. And one of our rollouts for next year, for the 22-23, is really revisiting our our PBIS matrices and making sure they're revisited and they're written in student-friendly language. That is, our goal is to get those grade level specific so that we operate on the 4 Bs at Sierra Verde. So how does it look to be respectful, responsible at areas across our campus? What does that look like in your grade? What does that look like in the cafeteria, on the playground, when you're in an assembly or you're at a field trip? And then obviously the PBIS component that we've had great success with, a program called PBIS Rewards this year, which we've launched, which is actually an online digital store where students spend their PBIS points that they're awarded through the year. And we had a great rollout of that this year, and we look to expand that next year. The kids are bought in, and K through 8, they love shopping at the PBIS store, kind of Amazon style. So making sure that all those behaviors are taught, they're preached, they're practiced, and they're reinforced throughout the year is critical. And I know we were very glad this year when Dr. Galligan and her department kind of built in a lot of that social emotional learning and the time to connect with kids at the beginning of the year and to build those relationships early so that we can teach those skills, and that pays dividends throughout the year. So being solid in Tier 1 is essential.
Thank you, Tony. And I would just like to reiterate to the board the importance that this is a multi-year effort. Just as it was for MTSA with Dr. Galligan and Dr. Chunas over a number of years, this too will take time for folks to implement at the levels that we want to. The systemic work involving the teams is what requires a shift from some of our folks. So whereas they may have been doing things in a particular way before, we are asking them to think differently for that. And because of that, we will need some time as far as with some of the work that will be put before them. Dr. McCusker, why don't you continue the conversation about Boys Town and CPI?
Thank you, Dr. Zurbach. CPI and Boys Town are also connected to not only tiered interventions, but also more specialized interventions. So CPI is a nonviolent crisis prevention that we utilize for students that may be a danger to themselves or others. Of course, we currently follow the ARS statute that guides that we only use this as a last resort. However, there are times when we do need to utilize CPI. And so Student Support Services trains all of our paraprofessionals, as well as some teachers and administrators in the area of CPI. We do have district trainers for CPI as well. They are going through some current training for advanced CPI techniques. One of the most important aspects of CPI, which is also connected to social skill instruction, is verbal de-escalation. The ability to calm a student down without having to put your hands on a student is, of course, of the utmost importance. And so the verbal de-escalation component is actually 95% of our CPI instruction. Connected to CPI is our Boys Town model. So our Barry Goldwater region is currently a region that has campuses that utilize Boys Town. There are two facets to Boys Town. The first is well-managed schools. We affectionately call it WMS. And so some of our more typical campuses utilize WMS, and that is a campus-wide social skill intervention and support systems for not only students, but also for staff. We also utilize specialized classroom management. Specialized classroom management is utilized on our Vista Peak campus. They have found great success with SCM, and we continue to forge ahead with SCM practices at Vista Peak. The positive intervention classroom that we've already spoken about this evening will also be utilizing specialized classroom management, as it is based in not only research and supports, but we found great success with it at Vista Peak. So as we forge ahead, at some point we will need to add a Boys Town consultant. The more campuses we add, we will need to have someone who will be able to monitor and review the success of Boys Town implementation. The success of this program is certainly based in the facets of social skill instruction, but also following scripted feedback for students so that they can find social skills success. What we don't want is to see an increase in referrals or discipline. And so our campuses that have been utilizing this have seen a great reduction in not only disciplinary referrals, but also in attendance. So as we move forward with 2023 through 2025 timeline, we will continue to provide CPI as a verbal de-escalation tool and to keep our students safe. As well, Boys Town, we will continue to expand additional campuses in the Goldwater region.
I would just add to this part, or to talk a little bit more about the sub-bullet point there as far as retraining our existing campuses and refining practices. It's important to keep in mind that some of the campuses that we have added over the past 2 years, they have sometimes received training in a less than optimal way. And so what I mean by that is typically we would have the in-person training that would be for a number of days, perhaps some before pre-service, some during pre-service. And as you know, with COVID, that has had to be adapted. And so we have had to have training provided at times via a virtual format, which is good, but sometimes not the most effective. And so we want to make sure that next year that we are looking at our existing campuses and helping them implement Boys Town to the level that it needs to be to make sure that we're realizing all the benefits that it can have. Dr. McCusker?
Regionalized behavior support. This is also from our last board meeting where we discussed regionalized behavioral support. As we look forward to support our specific regions, as we have heard from our esteemed principals, that behavior is the #1 concern. And so as we try to support from the district level in student support services, the proposal that Futures has brought forward is more regionalization, and behavioral regionalization could also be a great benefit to our campuses. So as we move forward for 2022 and 23, the BCBA has become a critical piece to the success of our regional behavioral teams. Our board-certified behavior analysts can do many things. They can provide very guided behavioral prescriptive advice. They can train. They can also conduct functional behavioral assessments as well as behavioral intervention plans. They are behavioral leaders. And so we are so fortunate in Deer Valley to have a few BCBAs. If we are able to expand our BCBAs and get one per region, they could lead and support behavioral teams. As well as we move forward, a psychologist, our amazing school psychologists are integral to the success of our students, not only from the behavioral and educational lens, but also from the mental health lens. So we would like to have one of our psychologists once a week do a day of assist with our behavioral teams. What would that look like? They would be providing guidance from a different lens, from a clinical lens, from the lens of an evaluation, or perhaps the lens of trauma. Why is this behavior occurring? Perhaps it is due to trauma. So how could we approach it in a different manner versus just disciplining? And then, of course, a mental health counselor consult. We are so very fortunate to have a mental health counselor at our Vista Peak location. And so we would be tapping into that area of expertise for consultation as well. We feel that this would beef up our behavioral teams and make them even more responsive to students with varied needs. As we move forward in 2023 and beyond, we would like to also add additional behavioral consultants to these regional behavior teams. As I spoke of earlier, we have a very limited BAT team at this time. We have 4 BAT team members and 1 tech, and that is a very limited team for a district of our size and scope. I'm very proud of the BAT team and the behavioral support they do provide, but they're very tired. So we want to be able to provide meaningful, direct, and quick responses to our campuses and our teams. Vista Peak expansion. So in 2022-23 school year, we are thrilled to announce that we are opening up an additional 5-8 classroom for our RAISE program. This may be familiar. Our RAISE program was instituted this year as a recommendation by our futures analysis. Being able to provide a more diverse and specialized program for our students that have medical fragility and or visual or hearing impairments. And so we've had a successful K-3 classroom this year. We are going to be expanding that to a K-4 classroom next year and opening up an intermediate RAISE classroom. Again, this is in vertical alignment, so our students can stay in Deer Valley and we will not have to privately place them outside of the district. We also have an intergovernmental agreement proposal with a district, Dysart Unified School District, and we may be able to bring students in from Dysart to be able to attend our program. The conversations that we've had with our surrounding school districts is they would much prefer to send students to Deer Valley Unified School District because they know the caliber and the ability of the programming at Vista Peak, and I'm very proud of that. As we move forward to 2023 and 25, again, we will be vertically planning for our RAISE program, and that would include secondary programming for our high school students. Potential additional programming options that are again recommended from the futures analysis may include perhaps an intellectual disability program for students who require a more intensive support system, and we would be able to service them in a private capacity. We may expand our additional autism programming at Vista Peak and so forth. And so this will also be a wonderful opportunity for our Grow Our Own program, which is one of the upcoming slides. We will be providing practica opportunities for our interns or our practicum students or teacher leaders. And so they would be able to attend extended school year and get to know students who have more extensive disabilities and become more familiar with practice. So we are going to be relocating our BAT team that currently lives with us at district office over to Vista Peak. Why are we doing this? First and foremost, because our campus of Vista Peak could definitely benefit from having behavioral experts as a home base. And again, their extensive training and knowledge can support our team.
One piece that is important to note about this slide is when we talk about expansion of Vista Peak, staffing is a key factor. And so the need to be flexible with this plan due to staffing is something that we certainly will have to keep in mind. Jenna, I don't know if you want to jump in some, but I can let the board know that we have had conversations, and I think this with you already with staff members at Vista Peak. And so it is certainly something that folks have on their minds is how can we help staffing at Vista Peak and keep the continuity of staffing there. Jenna, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that what we do have is the blessing of a group of people that choose to work at Vista Peak and continue to wear multiple hats and are willing to wear multiple hats. But as you know, that can only go so far. So we can only open the programming that we can actually staff. So we're not going to be so ambitious to where we tax the staff that is currently there. And we're also in discussion regarding the classified staff and looking at additional incentive or a differentiated financial support that they can receive because the behavior techs provide a different level of service than a para provides at another location. So that also is in discussion.
Thank you, Jenna.
Medicaid expansion. You may remember this from many of the board updates that I have provided, but we have had an opportunity, a great opportunity from the feds. They have provided an expansion of Medicaid billing. Why is that important or prudent to the futures analysis? Well, what it does is it provides an opportunity for student support services personnel and the grand scope of student support personnel to actually bill for service delivery for students we have not been able to bill for before. So open care has become quite expansive. We are able, as qualified medical providers, and there are many in student support services, we can bill and recoup Medicaid billing for not only special education students, but also general education students. So I have identified some of the domains. This is not an exhaustive list, but we are now able, for example, to bill for audiological services. This may seem like a small amount of students, but actually it is not. We have 2 district audiologists, both doctors of audiology. And instead of sending our students out to external resources, we are able to test our students who may have some more challenging hearing impairments and are unable to be tested at their school site. So our doctors of audiology go through an extensive audiological assessment in our sound booths, and we are actually able to bill for that now. We've never been able to do so. As we look down the scope, we are now also able to bill for board-certified behavior analysts. You may remember them from the prior slide. They are going to be at the peak of the behavioral regional support as we look at behavioral programming. So if they are able to bill for services that are rendered, as well as FBAs and BIPs, we will be able, through their qualified QMP, to be able to incur some of that medical cost. This is perhaps one of the most exciting slides, and Mrs. Moffett and I share joy in growing our own Deer Valley teachers. I will let you know that I made a Deer Valley tree. If you can see that, I made a Deer Valley tree. All right, so as we look to next year, 2022-23, we are beginning in student support services and HR to identify candidates and as well begin the interview process for our soon-to-be teachers in Deer Valley. We have built a scope and sequence and a curricula for courses for the fall of 2022. We are working on identifying campuses for teacher candidates, and of course, with the support of a coordinator for teacher preparation, we are going to be able to identify placement, supervision, and observation of these teacher candidates. As we move forward in 2023-25, we are also going to begin a general education strand of teacher preparation. Mrs. Moffett, would you like to add any additional comments to our upcoming scope? Okay. As we work on year 2 of teacher training and coursework, hopefully we'll have many lessons to learn from our special education strand that we can share with the year 2 cohort and our future cohorts. This is an iteration from our amazing principal advisory work team. Student Support Services has the wonderful honor of meeting with some of our principals through our work team on a monthly basis. And this, I believe, was a recommendation from Principal DeTore. Melissa, it would be great if we had an opportunity to train our teachers prior to them starting on day 1. And so we really identified some days this summer where we are going to be providing 3 days of #ExtraordinaryPD. The teachers will be paid. We are utilizing the wisdom in the house, and our in-home experts are going to be providing 3 fun-filled days of PD. So when our special ed staff, whether they're new or returning to Deer Valley, will start day 1 on their campus feeling better equipped, better supported. Principal DeTore, would you like to have any comments about this since it was your idea?
Yeah, I don't know if it was just my idea, but it is. We throw our teachers into so much training when they come back for so many things, right? We have PLCs, we have all kinds of things I won't name. But this is so important, and also having our special ed teachers feel, and not just the teachers, but also itinerant staff, um, feel that, wow, I'm solid. I've had some time to really hone my skills, or maybe fill in some gaps I didn't have going into the program. That level of feeling, and also networking and meeting others, gives them that, builds that support system for them as well. And then they can focus on the planning and the other things that the campus is going to throw at them, because we throw things at them, literally.
Thank you, Jackie.
And then finally, as we've already discussed, this is just a different glimpse or view of the futures timeline from 2022, upcoming this school year, through 2025 plus. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but it is certainly focusing on the big ideas that we've discussed this evening.
Thank you, Dr. McCusker. So our last slide here, although I have to say I'm still thinking about that tree, Dr. McCusker. Yeah, I do like that with the growing. This last slide captures a couple of important concepts for the Futures Upstate. The first one is just the enormity of input that was collected by the various work teams. You can see in these pictures, we truly had tens and tens and probably hundreds of folks that were involved, that met over the course of a number of years in various team meetings, in various surveys, and they provided such great input as far as how we would carry out what the experts told us in the futures report in terms of what we needed to do and how we could translate what the experts told us into an action plan. And so I just want to thank, and I know everyone here at the table wants to thank all of those folks who put in those extra hours of their time, because we know that time is the gold commodity, and so we appreciate them very much. And so with that, President O'Brien, that would conclude our part 2, and we would be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zerbach and Dr. McCusker and everyone else who is here to present this evening. Board members, questions? Mrs. Fisher?
Sure, you want to start with me? I knew when we first started pushing to have special ed reviewed and come in, I knew that the work would probably implement at the time that my son was gone. I knew that. I was okay with that because I knew the struggles I faced alone when he was little, and I wanted to empower parents. But the biggest thing I see missing in all of this is kids and parents in everything. And I know you guys work so hard, but when I think about the original vision that many of us had when we started all this was, they say kids don't need home ec. I actually like home ec, and I think we should still have it for kids because, face it, they all have to live. But these special needs kids, sometimes home ec is going to be the best thing for them. They need life skills. They need living skills. How many generations of kids are we going to lose before we actually accomplish getting to the kids? I'm very concerned. It's wonderful that we can bill, but I don't think that we are here on this. I don't think we're here to necessarily capitalize on the ailments of special needs children so that we can, get in more kids through additional funding and more funding, and so we can do medical services, because we need to educate our children. We need to give these kids a chance. The year that everybody spent in COVID, and I know it was a really rough year, I spent it doing home ec with my son. He can now cook. He does all of his laundry. He cleans his room, cleans his bathroom, cares for his dog. He can build some minor things, and he could work. It takes a lot of work to get a kid to that level. And it didn't start just there. I partnered with Deer Valley, with the fabulous teachers at Greenbrier and the principals and staff. But even before then, before we had a diagnosis, before we had anything else, I sat in classes at ASU and I learned behavior modification. I learned what it means when a child escalates. And if you catch them, and if you cave before they hit that point of escalation, next time they start at that point. And it continues on until you have the behaviors that are so high because we've created them. We've created the behaviors in kindergarten that now cause severe issues in junior high, high school, and beyond. The school and the district cannot do this alone. Where's the programs to help parents learn behavior modification and how to handle a special needs child? No child comes with a handbook. We all know that. You know, a placenta pops out afterwards, not a handbook. We all know it. But when it comes to a special needs child, there are so many strategies that are highly successful, and we don't need to recreate the wheel. I listen to, you know, behavior. We talk about we need to start somewhere. I agree. But one of the biggest things I noticed when it comes to our teachers are trained for everything. They're trained nonstop how to put bubbles on these pages and learn all these strategies and work together. But what they're not taught is how to de-escalate a child in a successful way. Not all of them. They are not taught that it's okay to have a strategy. And even if that strategy doesn't seem nice, partner with that parent. My son's best junior high teacher gave him the worst grade he has ever had, but he earned the grade he got. And when he had an issue with my son, which many teachers did have an issue with my son, and we dealt with them, but when he had an issue, he looked at my son and he goes, "You need to leave." And my son would go, because he knew that right outside that door of that classroom was a little square of carpet or a chair that if he was told to leave, he would take his happy little tail and he would sit out on it. And there was an actual real consequence for him that he faced. And that teacher had the best rapport with my son because he established that rapport, and he established that because he had the strategies and because I, as a parent, worked with him and empowered him. But a lot of our parents don't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't end up at ASU because I was in school. I ended up because I was fortunate to be a housewife with a husband who supported us. I didn't have to work. And so I went to ASU and I said, look, I'm a housewife. My husband supports us, but we don't have a lot of money. I can't afford to collect your class. I don't need a test. Can I just sit in the back? And the teacher said, absolutely. And they let me sit in the back and I learned. But our parents need us to give that support from kindergarten on to partner with them. And I know you guys are planning a lot of wonderful things, but I appreciate that we have these presentations. I would prefer we have a study session where our parents can come and our special needs parents can come and they can express, hey, this is where our hole is. Because none of us really knows where all the holes are. We find them as we struggle through them. I was very fortunate that I had people I could partner with through the years, but not all of our parents will have that. And I'm concerned we're missing the spot on some of these. So I really hope that we take a look at parent empowerment. I understand, you know, we have all these great acronyms to add to stuff, but I don't know why we need to recreate the wheel. Some of the behavior modification is really actually very simple. It is consistency and it is the allowance to be able to do things. You know, my son at about second grade stopped fits in public. He stopped them because I put him into a hold and I sat on the floor at Costco in that hold until he completely de-escalated. And yes, I had many people stop by and go and look. And I said, you want to take over because I can shop. You can hold him. I'll teach you a CIT hold. It's really kind of annoying and gets hot, but you can do it for me. And you know what? But he learned. And later on, when we had behaviors of him tapping at the doorway, we worked together, and we learned that if you just walk up behind him and give him a gentle nudge, he walked through it. And then for a while, he'd get to the door when he was about to tap, and he'd look over his shoulder because he knew somebody was about to give him a little push. When he scratched his face, I worked with Mr. Ross Kelly. I think that was actually even in high school. It was new behavior was about to start. But we came up with a strategy. We need to empower our teachers, and I just think we're doing a lot of really great planning to create something that exists, and we need to empower our teachers. So that's what I would like to hear. If it exists, if we're doing that kind of stuff, I would like to hear it. Because I've had teachers tell me, you know what, I really don't know what to do with that kid that comes, skipping towards me. I think he's about to attack me because I saw him attack someone. Give them that empowerment. If we're doing that, I would like to know. Because we do have massive teacher trainings, a lot. As we go, I'm sorry, we're bouncing between high school and elementary. But when we talk about more of our high school, transition life coursework, essentially home ec, and possibly life skills, partnership opportunities. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a lot of awesome programs where the state actually employed students. Half day, whatever, they learned some basic skills. A lot of these kids could learn those skills. TSW at the school level is really great on paper. It's a lot of classroom sitting. Sometimes it's some field trips, but my son did learn to make a mean baked potato. But he learned to work, not in TSW. He learned to work by me partnering with individuals who would take a chance and employ him. And I sent him into an employment situation with a habilitator. And eventually we phased out the habilitator and he went to work. We can do that. There's so many things that we can do, but I just really am concerned that we're doing a lot of planning and not a lot of action. And I don't know how many generations of kids we're going to lose in the process. So I really hope, and I don't expect it tonight, but if you could just give me a ray of hope that we're catching at least some of these kids now and not the kids that'll be here in 2032. I would really love to hear that kind of things that we're doing. And I know that the medically fragile and bringing in money, that may be great, but I don't want to capitalize on kids. I want to take the kids that are ours and make sure that they leave here successful. Because I have a lot of kids that I'm still in contact with that were in my son's classes, and they're not really successful. They're not really happy. They're still affiliated with TSW, but it just has not been successful for them. So I'm hoping at some point we can get some ray of hope, because I know you guys are working hard and they're great ideas. But if we don't grab the parents and start grabbing them young, I just don't see it happening. But that's just my input.
Thank you.
Mrs. Fisher. Sorry, Dr. Zurbach, go ahead.
No, just thank you, Ms. Fisher, for sharing that. And I do want to remind the board that in terms of parent involvement, there were many, many parents that were involved in the Futures report. And so the researchers, I couldn't tell you the exact number. I could look at that later and put that in a Friday update, but many, many parents were involved in that research process with the Futures. And so their input was factored into the report.
So thank you, Dr. Zurbach. Mrs. Ordway?
I'll just continue with the parent component. I'm sure that this report is not giving us every single plan or resource that we're going to have. But when my son started in Deer Valley, and he was a special education student, we had a liaison, and I know might have been more staffing, but what she did, and I think there were maybe 2 or 3 of them, was teach people, the parents, the guardians, how to interpret, understand, utilize
the IEPs. Along with them learning how to do it, so did the staff that was involved in an IEP or a 504. I don't know because I'm not involved in it anymore to that degree. I don't know what we provide for parents, if it's a booklet, if it's a phone call, if it's a whatever it is. But personally, what I would like to see, because I know that it was very successful, is to try, with the lack of time and personnel, of course, to have maybe some kind of seminars for our guardians and parents. And then to go to the transition to work, that I think needs to, not in this report, but at some point in time, we really do have to have an in-depth description of exactly what we do in the year 2022 as opposed to what we were even doing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Because things change as the times change. So getting off of that part of it, it's a very important part, but I don't think that was, it's meant for the futures report, although I do want parent resource in there. Where will the PIC classroom be? Are they, that's the question, where in 2022, 2023, where will that classroom be?
President O'Brien, Ms. Ordway, the location of the classroom, we have had some conversations with administrators on that, and we have an idea. However, that has not been disclosed overall to staff yet. And so once that happens, or once we know exactly the date of when that happens, we will certainly provide that information to you. But we have had communication with some administrators about this.
And it will be one classroom to service our inaugural dive into that, correct?
Yes, Dr. McCusker is probably the best to answer this, but at the onset, it will be one classroom. And we are working in terms of implementing this classroom as soon as possible next year. However, we do recognize that there could be some time in between the start of school and the first quarter when that classroom actually opens, but the goal is to open no later than the end of quarter one.
And then how many students what is the maximum number of students that can be in that classroom?
Dr. McCusker?
President O'Brien, Ms. Ordway, the positive intervention classroom for the K-3 classroom, we would see a maximum of 12 students for that classroom. Research supports that if we had more students than that, we would not be able to provide that strategic intervention. As well, I'd like to answer your first question about how do we support parents, as well as Ms. Fisher's question. We did used to have what you're referring to as a parent liaison. That was an identified role in student support services, and there were staffing cuts, and that was one of the positions that was cut. However, I can speak very clearly to the fact that student support services has conversations with parents on a daily basis. So I have the great opportunity to speak with parents in many facets and many opportunities. We also have initiated within the last 3 years, and COVID really provided more opportunity for us to do this. We have wraparound support meetings with our parents, which includes our partners in Southwest Behavioral Health and Services, as well as Student Support Services leadership and campus teams. Sometimes we need to come together to really talk about how we can provide more resources in the home, how we can provide those wraparound supports from social service agencies, and how we can get additional training to our parents through the community. And so we've had great luck with that. That is something that we are very proud of and we've been quite successful with. As well at the school level, the special ed strategists, as well as our school psychologists, as well as our special ed teachers, really have in-depth conversations with our parents about, for example, the transfer of rights at the age of majority. We have those meaningful conversations with them, whether it's in an IEP format or whether it is during conferences or before or after school. So there are many different venues in which our parents can attain information. As well, we've conducted trainings for our parents about graduation and reaching the age of majority, and also working with vocational rehab, as well as the Department of Developmental Disabilities. And those have been parent seminars for our parents this year. But we are always willing and able to expand more opportunities and resources for our parents.
And I'm sure that there are many individual meetings that, or over the phone, whatever. What I'm referring to, though, is more of an overall setting. So perhaps I don't know that I should ask this question, but invited to this, I would be able to ask the question, and I would find out that there's maybe 30 people that are just like me, and we could trade recipes for behavior and all sorts of things. So that's what I was kind of looking at, to build a community as opposed to the silos that parents and guardians of children with special needs often feel that they're sitting in. So maybe not for this, but I think I might have planted another seed under your tree, and that's it. And thank you very much for your hard work. And principals, I think we're almost done with them, huh, Anne?
Thank you all for your presentation this evening. I am going to email my questions in. They're largely related to staffing and a little bit related to the PIC room. I will tell you that I understand the need to wade slowly, I guess, into the water sometimes. However, I do have a concern about having one classroom for K through 3 across a district that has, I believe, 32 K8s and K6s. And so I do, you can put it in an update related to this, is, how much data are you going to look for a whole year's worth of data if, after it's open a quarter or a semester, and we have some positive data, could we look to expand that sooner? Clearly, COVID upended everybody's world. However, I do worry about every year we lose, making it better for our students. So if you could address some of that in the Friday update, I'll send the rest of my questions related to positions to Dr. Finch to get answered. Thank you all. Thank you, principals, for being with us this evening. Having said that, we will move on to call to the public. Mrs. Ordway, could you please read the admonishment?
I certainly shall. The board invites public comment on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. All speakers must observe the rules of decorum. Speakers must fill out a card listing name, address, and topic, handed to the board secretary prior to the president calling the meeting to order. Speakers must make their comments in no more than 3 minutes. If necessary, to accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute overall time limit, the board president may shorten each speaker's time. Constructive criticism is in order. Rudeness, vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting personal dignity are not in order and will not be allowed. Under the Arizona Open Meeting Law, the governing board cannot discuss or act on any items that are not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism made by a speaker, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be put on future agendas. And with that, we have 4 speakers. Jen Baldy, Kelsey Reed, Cindy Lund, and Kendra Amont. If you
please step up to the microphone in the
sorry,
order
yeah.
you were called.
Do you want me to say that again? After Jen is going to be Kelsey Reed, and then Cindy, and then Kendra.
So if you'll step up to the microphone, state your name for the record, and your time will begin.
Thank you, President O'Brien, members of the board. My name is Jen Baldy, and I am a member of the calendar committee. I'm here to speak about your preview for the 23-24 and 24-25, specifically 24-25 calendars, which are proposed as accelerated calendars. The purpose for me being here tonight is to talk to you about the lack of stakeholder support for an accelerated calendar. I know that there was a survey done, and the calendar committee has reviewed those results, and I believe you'll be seeing them later today. But one of the big problems with that survey was that most of it was you would vote support, somewhat support, or do not support. And the results of the survey that I saw are being clumped together with that support and somewhat support. And many of the somewhat support stakeholders in their comments did not actually support the accelerated calendar, but rather would support a change to the current calendar with starting later in August and ending later in May. One of the big problems that I see with an accelerated calendar is going to be the students, the primary students. That's my biggest concern with their ability to come for their first quarter. They have 2 weeks off and then they go back. If you talk to any kindergarten teacher, you're going to hear about how much time they spend during that first quarter on procedures. And I can tell you, my son is a kindergartner, and when he returned from his 4-day break in September, they required quite a few procedure instructions before they could get back into educating, which would be our sole purpose. My other concern has to do with the heat. I know that districts back east that are doing accelerated calendars, they don't have this problem. But I was a property manager, and I can attest to the costs that you will see in your HVAC systems um, during that July, not only in operating them, but in any other kind of problems that arise, along with bus issues, traffic issues for walkers that are driving because it's hot. Um, let's see. Oh, classified staff. That's going to be a big one because many of them are not being paid during that 2-week period. I'm worried that you're going to lose some of those people to other districts due to them not being able to pay their bills. And the two proposed calendars, I said I couldn't support either of them because they're both accelerated calendars. Um, but they also have individual problems. One is with the Thanksgiving. Stakeholders typically do not want those 3 days to be in school. I see my
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker will step to the microphone. State your name for the record and your time will begin.
My name is Kelsey Reed, and I would like to discuss standards-based grading. The 2020-21 school year was one of the most difficult academic years for teachers, students, and parents, with the quick transition to online learning strategies followed by all of the COVID protocols. Yet, when the schools were going to finally be able to experience some level of normalcy, the district decided it was the perfect time to implement a new grading system, a grading system that came with little to no training or infrastructure in place. Power Schools is only capable of showing whole number grades, so students have no idea if their 3 is a 3.4 or a 2.5, and therefore are unsure of if they should be retaking their assessments. Nearly 1 year after implementation, this technology incompatibility is still not resolved. 1 year in, teachers still are not exactly sure how to successfully transition from the traditional grading system to what appears to be a somewhat subjective grading philosophy. Some teachers are simply calculating percentages and converting them to standard-based grading numbers. So a 4 might equal an A, which is 90 to 100%. 3 might equal B, which is 80 to 89%. Some teachers are not offering threes, are only offering 3s and not 4s unless students go above and beyond. Yet, above and beyond can't ever seem to be defined, which has led to declining student GPAs by some of the highest achievers and some lost scholarships. Some teachers are capping the number of assessments students can retake, while others are not. Some teachers do not even know how to draft a rubric, which is an integral part of successful standard-based grading. A grade of D at some DVUSD schools meets student athletic eligibility, allows for attendance to prom, and meets minimum requirements for graduation, while a 1 in standard-based grading does not qualify a student for any of these. So is a 1 not equivalent to a D? Do either of these truly support student mastery? The one thing that this quick and careless implementation of standard-based grading in DVUSD has brought about is inconsistency. Inconsistency between the way that different schools within the district interpret grades, inconsistency between the way different teachers apply grading, inconsistency as to what is considered a passing grade or not. All of this inconsistency in a district that is unified and prides itself on consistency. I've spoken to a dozen teachers and parents, the majority of which have expressed that this unsupported, inconsistent grading system in DVUSD has had an overall negative impact on teachers and students. To gather additional information, I put together a survey that received 213 responses from 42 teachers, 169 parents, and 2 students. 65% of the survey respondents were affiliated with schools that are currently using standard-based grading. 168 respondents, 79% of the overall respondents, do not want standard-based grading to be implemented in their Valley.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. The next speaker could step to the microphone, state your name for the record, and then your time will begin. And you can adjust the microphone if you need to. So thank you.
My name is Cindy Lundy. I'm a teacher in the district, and I have 2 high schoolers and 1 7th grader attending DVUSD schools. I'm here to express my concerns about standards-based grading. As a parent, my concerns are shared by hundreds, if not thousands, of DVUSD parents whom this is currently affecting or will affect next year. As a teacher, my concerns are shared by a significant amount of my DVUSD colleagues. Many have admitted that they are afraid to speak out against this in fear of retaliation. I admit I'm extremely anxious for the same reason. However, I feel I must express what I know is right. My 2 high school students have been using this program all year, and it's been nothing but a source of confusion and anxiety for them. They've always been nearly straight A students with GPAs well over the 4-point mark. Because of this grading system, they are now getting some 3s, which will likely be a hit to their GPA, as well as their college scholarship opportunities. Of course, they don't know what it will do because it has never been explained to them. When asked how close they are to a 4 or even a 2, they have no idea. One student recently spent a week preparing for a project and a weekend completing it, countless hours of work. This normally straight A student received a 3 on the project with no explanation from the teacher, no rubric, no comments whatsoever. This has happened all year long with both of my kids, with all kinds of assignments and assessments. This tells me unquestionably that this system is subjective and immeasurable. How close are they to a 4? A 2? What do they need to work for in order to get a 4? Is it even possible? These are questions no one knows the answer to. Please note that I do not blame the teachers. They were forced into this program clearly without proper training. High school students report that their teachers grade differently. Some say 90 to 100% is a 4. Some skills are higher, some are lower, or in some cases, it's almost impossible to get a 4 no matter what they do, even if they get every answer correct or meet every requirement. What message are you sending to kids when they don't even understand what they're working toward? Why should they even bother trying if they know that the coveted 4 is out of their reach? As a teacher, we have had professional development on this throughout the school year, and I have not found one single teacher who currently uses the A to F system who is okay with these changes. We are confused, anxious, and afraid about what this will do to our students. On our district report cards, we already do standards-based grading along with the letter grades. Now you're asking us to eliminate the one measurable part of the report card that everyone knows and understands by making us leave only the standards on there. Along with the grade, parents can see in Power Schools their child's overall percentage grade so they know how close they are to the above or below grade. From our understanding, this will all be eliminated, and all we will be able to see is a vague number for dozens of different standards. According to the training we have received, students who struggle or who have learning disabilities or other special needs will never earn a higher grade than a 2. How will that affect their self-esteem? Teachers have been told they need to make their own rubric for every standard we teach. We even spent an entire afternoon in training writing one rubric. The amount of time this will take is simply impossible. The trainers were unable to answer many of the questions that we have about how this will work next year. How are we supposed to know what to do if these people teaching us cannot answer our questions?
Thank you for your comments. Please state your name for the record, and then your time will begin.
Good evening, Kendra Ament. I'd like to bring attention to the rising concerns many have expressed with the Phase 1 rollout of the standard-based grading policy. This policy has brought mass confusion, questions, and concerns to the school community, especially amongst high school students and parents. The rollout this year was rushed without providing training and infrastructure for teachers or feedback from parents and students. Leading up to the rollout, we experienced a hectic 2 years due to COVID-19. Why did the district assume another drastic change to our students' learning was a good idea to an already fractured system? A grading system should be based upon clear understanding, set learning targets, and instruction. The purpose of a grade is to represent skill and knowledge. Educators must understand the framework and provide consistent feedback to students that allow them to reach the level of mastery. Among the concerns of inadequate teacher training, inconsistent grading, and explanations of the process, students continue to hear the phrase, "You must go above and beyond." Needless to say, the grade of 4 is so difficult to earn. We see students who have dependable AB achievers, that are AB achievers, now receiving 2s in AP dual enrollment courses where the curriculum is already indicated to be above grade level. Without feedback and constructive corrections on assignments that contain evidence and resources, students are testing blind. They need instruction on what was done incorrectly prior to testing so they can perform their best on the assignments that get calculated towards the overall grade. Students have expressed concern with not earning class credit, possibly not graduating, and potentially losing scholarship opportunities. Worst of all, we now have students that are so confused and frustrated they've given up on trying. They've stopped asking questions, communicating with their teachers. They've given up on themselves. We know that teachers see their students' confidence falling, participation decline, the defeat on their faces. So as parents, we ask, why is this allowed to continue? While seeking information, I found one consistency other than the above and beyond phrase, and that is fear. Fear of not achieving goals, fear of disappointment, fear of feeling sad, anxious, angry, fear of having an opinion, fear of having a voice. I asked students and teachers to speak tonight. Most declined for fear of retaliation and fear of their honest feelings becoming exposed to be judged and questioned by their community and their peers. This is what the standard grading policy brought us, and it will leave permanent scars.
Thank you for your comments.
Are we ready to go?
Dr. Finch, if we could get an update on where we're at with standard-based grading in the Friday update, that would be great. Yes, next we will move on to consent agenda.
No, we're going to go to old business.
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess we'll go to old business before we go to consent agenda. If you want
If
to
I
do
was
things
paying
in
attention,
order.
so I would make a recommendation, or I would ask that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve amendment number 7 to the intergovernmental agreement between Deer Valley Unified School District and the Maricopa County Library District for the North Valley Regional Library at the Boulder Creek High School.
Do you have a second? Second. Are you second? Okay, Mrs. Fisher seconds. Is there any question or discussion? Hearing,
It's changed, right?
has anything changed, Dr. Finch, or?
President O'Brien, members
Mr.
of the board.
Miglerino, thank you.
I'm sorry, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. There have been no changes since we previewed this last time, and in our discussions with Maricopa County, they are in agreement with the changes as I had mentioned previously.
No changes, Mrs. Fisher.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 2-1.
I would ask that the governing board, oh, I'm sorry, did you get that, Sheila? Okay.
Next.
I would ask that the governing board approve consent agenda items 6A through 6J.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously while I wait for the technology to catch up with us. Okay, we can move on to 7A.
I would ask that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to adopt revision number 2 to the fiscal year 2021-2022 expenditure budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any governing board member questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
It just popped up.
Item 7B.
All right, I would ask that the governing board approve all employees out-of-state travel per governing board policy, GCCE.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
I would ask that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
Is there a second? Have a motion and a second. All those, any questions or discussion?
No, I do have a question, but I'll just email you.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, which takes us to item 8 of our preview, the 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025 district calendar options. And for that, we have with us the lovely Mrs. Myers. Oh, and Dr. Galligan, I apologize, I didn't follow the script.
You did not.
I did not.
Good evening, Governing Board, President Ordway and Dr. Finch. My name is Karen Meyer. I'm the chairman of the Calendar Committee, and I'm here to go over a presentation for calendars for the school year 2023-24 and 24-25. Next slide. Do I? Okay. We will go over the process, and then we will give you information about the accelerated learning calendar, and then we will review calendar options. Next slide. The purpose of the Calendar Committee is to discuss options for the 23-24, and we're adding in 24-25 calendars and bring recommendations to the board for review. I do make a note that the committee does not discuss staff development days or early and full release days. Our committee is made up of 7 parents, 1 community member, 3 certified staff, 2 classified, 2 school administration, 2 district administration, and I act as the facilitator. Next slide. This year we are bringing we have changed our process slightly in the fact that we are bringing you 2 school years to consider rather than just 1 as we have in the past. And we are also previewing for your consideration an accelerated learning calendar for the year 2024-25 school year. I would like just to remind you what you approved for 2022-23, just as a quick review, looking that we start on August 3rd, that we have 2 Labor Day and a fall break day on September 26th. We have Columbus Day on the 10th. Veterans Day, we have 1 week at Thanksgiving, remembering that we asked for consistency in the Thanksgiving vacation because in the past we had alternated 3 days, 5 days. So we have we've kept that at 5 days for the 2023 calendar. A typical winter break, we have staff development on January 2nd, so students would return on January 3rd. MLK Day and Presidents, 1 week in the spring, April 7th as a spring break day, and then we would actually end school on Friday, May 19th for students. So teachers would be returning the following Monday. So that is the calendar we presented to you last year that you have adopted just for your reference when we go on to our new calendars for you. Looking at 23-24, this is option A. Starting on July 31st, having 2 fall break days, and then having our Columbus Day, having Veterans Day, the 1 week at Thanksgiving, and then our winter break would start on the 18th and go through the 2nd being a staff development day. The reason we had to add 1 day is January 1st falls on a Monday, which is when you know, the holiday. And then, of course, MLK Day, President's Day, 1 week in March. And then March 29th as a spring break day, ending school on May 16th. And noting that it is 1 week before Memorial Day, but in order to keep our semesters even, 91 to 89 days. That is why it is a slightly earlier calendar, because it's just where Memorial Day falls. And then if we look at option B, just to compare it, it again starts on July 31st, September 4th. We have 2 days in September, the 25th and 26th as a fall break day. And then October 9th, the November 10th, the traditional Thanksgiving break. The difference here, if you look at our winter break, we brought it in and put 2 days into December 18th and 19th. As a possibility to then take your break through January 3rd, with students returning January 4th. And then our typical President's Day, March, the spring break day ending again on the 16th. So if you look at the two in comparison, that we have put in red the differences: 2 fall break days in option A, 3 fall break days in option B, and then the big difference is really when winter break would begin. And so those are the considerations that we are bringing you for 23-24 school year. The committee, there were 9 committee members in support of option A and 6 committee members in support of option B. I asked them to give me their preferences. I did want to draw attention to other district calendars just so you could look at them. And I'm just going to look at the 23-24. If you look at, I always include Peoria because, as you know, when we go to select graduation dates, they get first choice. So I do always have you look at that calendar. They are starting in 23-24 August 9th, and they are ending on May 23rd. Gilbert we have put in because they are implementing an accelerated learning calendar, and as you can see, when we start into their 22-23 and 23-24, they have backed up and they are starting earlier in 23-24, July 25th, with a 2-week intercession, October 2nd through the 13th. Veterans Day, 3 days at Thanksgiving. They have a typical winter break, 2 weeks intercession in March. They do take Good Friday, and then they end school May 23rd. Now, if we go to the second page, I also put Chandler in because they too have accelerated learning calendar, and they start July 19th. They have 11 days in October, 3 days for Thanksgiving, 12 days for the winter break, 11 days for their spring intercession, and then they also end on May 23rd. And then just Tolleson, because they also use the stadium, they have a traditional calendar starting October 3rd. They have a fall break. They have their Thanksgiving. It's very similar to what we have seen in the past, ending their school year on May 24th. So with that, if we go to the next part of the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Galligan, who deserves a huge round of applause and many, many thanks for the hours and the hours that she has put into giving you information on the accelerated learning calendar that we want to present to you this evening.
Dr. Galligan, before you begin, because it is such a different calendar, I would just like to take a pause and see if our board members have any questions on the first calendar presented. Mrs. Fisher, any questions or comments? On the first one for 22-23? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Meyer, for your work on that, and thank you for your committee work as well. Dr. Galligan.
Thank you, President O'Brien, members of the board, Dr. Finch. I will share some information tonight. Some of it you've seen in board updates about the accelerated learning calendar that we are proposing for the 24-25 school year and beyond. Now, this is just one of the mitigation strategies that we have been working on since COVID started on how we can best support loss of learning and loss of learning opportunity for children. As you know, as we've lived over the past 3 years of the pandemic, we have noted the negative effects on student learning, student behavior, student emotional well-being. Deer Valley has identified many mitigation strategies, and one of them I mentioned in the Futures Report with our efforts with MTSS-A and MTSS-B. We know that the calendar proposal is just another strategy in our toolbox that we've identified to help us address typical learning loss over the summer, as well as those COVID-related learning losses. And those COVID-related learning losses are for our gen ed students, our English language learner students, our special education students, and even our students who are advanced. So we want to focus on student learning, and that's the whole proposal here, is how can we continue to provide additional learning resources for children. A balanced calendar like the accelerated learning calendar provides additional intervention learning options for students that will help with learning loss because of COVID and summer break. Reducing the amount of time students are out of school for extended periods of time may produce opportunities for students to stay on track, as well as continue their learning. Summertime can be intellectually detrimental for students without intellectual stimulation, enrichment, or reinforcement during the summer. Schools can provide remediation and enrichment for students during the breaks, or the intersessions as we call them, so that students have opportunities to relearn material, practice skills, catch up, and experience non-academic enrichment activities continuously through the year. Increased opportunities for enrichment or acceleration could also be available that may not be an option during the regular school season. When you take a look at this particular slide, these 3 bullets really address how can we reduce and mitigate learning loss for our students who typically have gaps, and mitigate loss of learning opportunity for our gen ed students as well as our high achieving students. So the remediation intervention opportunities would be for not only our at-risk students, but all gen ed and advanced students, as well as providing enrichment and interest-based opportunities that speaks to the whole child. Then again, potentials to reduce our summer learning loss. Research has shown, and there is a link there to that research, that a typical average student loses 17 to 34% of their prior year's learning gains during the summer break. And then, as I've mentioned, the ongoing long-term concern for COVID-related learning gaps, as well as those emotional setbacks that students still feel with unfinished learning or emotional concerns. When we want to see what is our proposal for an accelerated learning calendar, the school year would begin in the 3rd or 4th week of July, depending on the school year. There would be a 2-week fall intersession with opportunity for intervention, support of students' enrichment. We would look at 3 days off for a Thanksgiving break. However, we know that that is a part of the Deer Valley culture, and if we needed to add in those 2 days, we could add in a day at the beginning of the year and potentially a day at the end of the year. The first semester would end prior to the winter break with that 2 weeks off. There would be 2 weeks of spring intercession, very similar to the fall, and then school would generally end prior to the Memorial Day weekend. Other advantages to note is that there would be choice for family vacations other than summer break during peak times. That was mentioned, and you'll see that later in the presentation by both families as well as teachers. Child care costs, we feel, would be similar. They would be scheduled differently through the year. The calendar remains at 180 instructional days. There is no change to the number of days that children receive instruction. The summer is shortened by just 1.5 to 2 weeks. Sports and extracurricular activities continue during breaks and as usual during the summer because we follow AIA guidelines. Interested teachers could choose to work just like they do in the summer if they wanted during intercessions, but that is a teacher or a staff choice. They could earn extra pay during those intercessions, providing intervention, remediation, and management. Our extended school year for our students with disabilities would continue during the summer break. The mitigating strategy here would be is that there would be fewer weeks that they would not be in school. And then, as I mentioned before, there would be staff opportunities to earn extra money during intercessions, should that be their choice. When we look at some of the school districts in our state that are currently on a similar learning calendar, you can see them listed over on the right, and the year that they began this type of a calendar. That would be Chandler, Higley, Crane Creek, all have been doing those for over 20 years. Vale, Maricopa, and Gilbert will be starting next year, as Ms. Meyer mentioned. So these are some of the districts that have given us the gift of their learning over that time period for a similar type calendar. In 2018, prior to Union Park opening, we were, if you remember, going to open Union Park as a Spanish immersion school. We wanted to find out from our parents in the zip code areas around that campus about the type of immersion program, but we also had this particular question in that survey. Again, it just went to the zip codes that are around Union Park. The parent survey was, would you be in favor of us exploring a modified year-round calendar? 55% were in favor or had no preference, and 45% were not in favor. And then COVID hit, and we did not, we stopped all of the work that we were doing toward that. I'd like to share with you the timeline that we've experienced this year. As you know, we started sharing information with you in November in our Friday updates. We talked with our calendar committee in December through March. There were 3 meetings that occurred during that time period. We introduced information to our campus admin in February. Communication went out to our Deer Valley staff and parents in February and March. Surveys were administered on February 25th and ended the Friday before spring break. We have just completed employee and parent focus groups just the past 2 weeks since the last board meeting. And we did send out a student survey to our 8th and 9th grade students. Our current 8th and 9th grade students would be juniors and seniors if this calendar were approved for 2024-25. We are bringing to you right now this as a preview item and then potentially bringing it to you as an action item at the May 24th board meeting. We have had plenty of information on our website. You can see here each of these are links to many pieces of information that parents can see, in addition to the learning webinar and FAQs and example calendars from other districts. This is just another way that we've tried to communicate with our stakeholder groups, whether they were our parents or our staff. I'm going to share with you now the survey results, and you have seen these particular survey results already. We had over 4,000 parents complete the survey, and you can see 41% were strongly supporting, 38% did not support, and then there was that 21% that somewhat supported. And as the parent mentioned, that somewhat support really is some had lots of questions, some still wanted to know more, but they didn't choose do not support. However, if we take that section out, 41% of the parents who responded strongly supported and 38% did not. I also want to share with you the survey results, and you can see here, certified is in the top left survey, and you can see the number that supported. I believe it was 38. My eyes just can't see that quite as well. You can also see the number that did not support. I believe that's 29%. I apologize if I am off. And then there was about 32% who had that, 32% was the somewhat support. Again, lots of questions that we are going to talk about in just a bit. But when you look at just the two strongly support and do not support, the number of staff that strongly support in our certified community was greater. If you look down below, actually look over to the right with our classified staff. So our classified staff, again, was fairly close in that I believe 31% were strongly supporting, and I believe, is that number 30?
It's 33 and 30.
33 and 30.
Strongly support.
That's much better. Thank you, Karen. 33 strongly supported, 30% did not, and then the larger part was the somewhat support. Again, lots of questions. If we let go of that somewhat support, you can see that 33% of those that responded were in favor, 30% were not. If you glance over to the bottom left in our admin, 52% strongly supported. The 22% did not, and then we had the next group in the red that had the summer 26% somewhat. I should have brought my cheater glasses. I see you shaking your head. Next time I will. I might have to. And then if you scroll your eyes over to the exempt, you could see that we had 49% that were strongly in support, 20% that did not support, and then about 31% who somewhat supported with questions.
Who falls into the exempt category, Dr. Galligan?
Exempt would be, I believe, and I'd have to follow up with Dr. Smith, it would be our staff at the district level. That includes, I believe, bus drivers and, okay, who would it be, Mr. Miglerino? Help me
Or
out
Dr.
here.
Smith in the back, do you know the answer to that question?
They're actually self-selected, but ideally, yeah, certified, classified, and exempt bus drivers can be classified, for example. So exempt are mostly level 5, or you probably knows better than me. But mostly district office with a few exempt, mostly technically APs would be exempt at the schools. So, Jim, you can do a better job probably.
Thank you.
Are we good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If we look at this, this is the compilation of all. As you saw before with parents, 41% strongly supported, 38% did not support, 21% somewhat supported, had questions. When we put all of those 4 employee groups together, 38% strongly supported, 29% did not support, with 33% somewhat supporting. And then putting all of our stakeholder groups together, that would be all of the 4 employee groups you saw and our parents, 40% strongly supported, 35% did not support, with 24% somewhat supporting. So the survey results, to tell you the truth, surprised us all, actually. But those were the survey results from all of our stakeholder groups. Now what I'd like to share with you is, as the parent mentioned, there were comments, and you all have had an opportunity to look at those comments as well. What Jenna, Cabinet, and the team did, along with our calendar committee, was look at trends, those big ideas that floated to the top. These are the advantages that both our parents and our employee groups identified. If you look to the right, opportunity to close student achievement gaps during those intersessions, providing or preventing potential summer slide or decreasing that summer slide, opportunities to take our families throughout the break and the vacations during those intersessions. And one of the big things that both parents and staff identified is that could potentially help with both student attendance and teacher staff attendance. Of course, decreasing teacher burnout, and I would include in there decreasing student burnout, and then more stability for students with special needs. Our employees, very similar opportunities for employee emotional recharge during the off session, improving the academics for student during those targeted times for intervention and extension enrichment, opportunity for intersession teaching for additional compensation. Another one that was identified is just-in-time professional development opportunities. Again, those would be optional for staff that were interested in participating, very similar to what we do in the summer months. And then potential to reduce absences for staff and students. So you can see there's some similar advantages noted here. When we look at the obstacles that were identified by both parents and employees in that survey, of course, heat was right up the top, and that's true for both parents and employees. Child care during intersession could be difficult for families. Athletics raises pretty high in concerns from our high school parents. We may not be able to be in sequence with close-by districts, and that would be a concern for families who may have children in multiple systems. And then for many of our parents that voted they did not want to move in this direction, they just didn't want to have change. When we look at our employees, again, additional heat advisory days, wanted to keep the same summer break length. It could impact summer employment. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Keeping Thanksgiving 5 days off rather than 3, and then changes in pay for some classified. That would be potential to decrease some pays when off session, but annual compensation would not charge. Again, 180 instructional days that our staff would be in place, and that includes our classified staff. When we look at our stakeholder focus groups that occurred over the past 2 weeks, what I wanted to share here was that on April 28th, Jenna, Ms. Moffitt, led both our middle school and high school principals in a focus group, and then our K-6 and K-8 principals in a focus group. Then I led a parent group late that afternoon. On Monday, May 2nd, our certified employees who were randomly selected attended their focus group. May 3rd, we sent out the student survey. On May 4th, our classified employees had their focus group, and those were, again, randomly selected employees. And then on May 5th, we invited our parents from our POP group to participate, and so they had their own focus group. When you look at the results, we worked with them in 3 ways. We asked them first to give us just their thoughts in a Google Doc, so their thoughts, what they saw as advantages, again, what they saw as obstacles. Then we broke them out with a focus group facilitator, a breakout facilitator who met with their team of breakout, whether it was parents or classified or certified staff, and had a very specific question protocol for that breakout time. And then after that, we took time for both a Google Doc for parents to continue to submit surveys, classified and certified as well as just taking an open opportunity to unmute and come together. So when you look at those results, you can see that for our certified and classified groups together, 32.4% were in favor, 32.4% were on the fence of the 2 groups that were there. 29.7% were not in favor, and then about 5.5% didn't know much, but they didn't have a particular opinion at that time. Then when you look at our parent focus group, we had 50% who said they would favor it, 40% who would not favor it, and 10% who were a maybe or an unsure at that point in time. We also gathered those concerns and questions and advantages, and what we asked them to do, and this was part of the protocol that Ms. Moffitt put together, was you've heard all of this information now. We did a very similar presentation. Would you help us identify new advantages and possibly new obstacles or questions that we hadn't thought through? So what you see here is a compilation of all of the stakeholder groups. That would be our campus admin, that would be our parents, our certified, and our classified. If you look at the newly identified advantages, they talked a little bit about a reduction in review and reteaching so that we could start the year pretty clean with fewer weeks in that reteach review realm. Again, they mentioned bridging that gap that students are in while maintaining a healthy balance of break time. Students are ready to go after a break. Now, this was our educators who identified this, that we know our kids after the summer break are ready to get back and go into learning, be with their friends, be with their teacher. And so this might help with that mid-semester slump. Doctor's appointments, dentist appointments for both students and staff could be scheduled during those intersession times, providing less impact on student learning and student staff absences. Continuity, again, for special education students. Opportunity for our high school students to catch up between quarter 1 and quarter 2. And then family trips could cost less for those families who choose to take them due to not being in a summer peak time. When we look at the new obstacles or questions that our stakeholder groups brought, our immersion school had a concern that this could impact our language immersion teachers from outside the U.S. You notice we have a short window of time for those visas and when they get to start with us, so that could be a potential concern. Right now, our staff are able to choose, our certified staff, our 10-month classified staff, are able to choose 24 or 26 pay options. Would that still be available? Would transportation be available during intersessions? Would extended school year remain at 6 weeks in the summer? What would the 12-month employee work calendar look like? Would there be any changes? Will all work calendars need to be adjusted? Helping crossing guards with additional summer days? Are Title I families leaving the country and not returning in a timely manner? And then we had one parent who brought up a concern that youth sports and club sports, what are we going to do to support them? When we look at our additional survey data, so the last calendar meeting was on March 30th, and at that time, Ms. Meyer and I presented the survey data, the survey comments. Toward the end of that meeting, Ms. Meyer asked, okay, who is in favor, who is not in favor, and who is a maybe? And you can see here that we had 7 of the team members in favor, 3 not in favor, 3 just needed more information, or they were a maybe. You can see the breakdown there of our parents who were there as well as staff. And when you look at the percentages of that one, what you'll see is the yeses were about 52% almost, the maybes were about 23%, and the noes were 23% as well. So that just gives you a feel of where the calendar committee was on March 30th, our last meeting. And then, as I mentioned, we did have a student survey to our 8th and 9th grade students. It was very similar to the parent one, except it just asked, do you support or do you not support? And you can see for our 8th and 9th grade students, they may not understand the true what this calendar is, but we had far more who said, nope, I don't think this is what I want, and far fewer that said, yep, let's go for it. Now what I'd like to do is just take a moment to share with you some of the obstacles that the survey identified, our focus groups identified, and that we had already identified. And so I'd like to chat with you first about facilities. So we know some of the things that were brought up were about cleaning schedules over the summer, those larger summer projects, and then air conditioning in general. I'm not going to read the concerns to you, but what I would like to do is just share the next steps that we have thought through. We've been pretty thoughtful about the amount of time it would need to have in place for us to work through a change like this calendar. If you remember when we moved forward with the Friday early release for teacher collaboration, we took a full year to work out all of the logistics, all of the challenges, all of the things that had to be in place, including communication. That's very true for this also. We believe it will take us 2 years to work through all of these types of obstacles, as well as include how we're going to do it. So for our facilities, during the 2-year planning, our facilities would review the summer cleaning and summer projects to determine how to distribute those tasks during the summer and then across the intersessions. When we talked with those districts that were listed above who have been in this for 20 years or less, that is what they have done. They put a plan together with their facilities folks, and they lay it out for both summer and intersession. That planning would include input from campus administrators and review of projects scheduled for the following 2 years. One of the amazing things that Deer Valley does is they lay their projects out multiple years so we can look to see what the impact would be. And then for our air conditioners that may go out, and that happens, ensure that monthly checks are completed on building units for proactive solutions. This would just be part of our facilities team working with Mr. Migliorino and having a plan to be able to share with you all and our community, including our campuses. The next 2 slides are for staffing. So when we talk about hourly employees, so these would be our classified folks who are not 10-month and they're not 12-month. They are our hourly employees, and they are on an hourly rate. The impact on our hourly employees could be an impact during the intersessions if, when we identify where those 2 weeks fall, it would fall on both weeks of a pay cycle. So we would work with payroll and HR in that planning as we look at 2 years in advance. When we talked with the districts also about this, they were very clear that that happens. What they do is work with their classified groups and be proactive about communicating about budgeting and ensuring that the 180 days of compensation that they would receive in any type of care, that they are being mindful of when those breaks may occur and when the pay cycles occur. For our custodial staff, you can see where the concerns may be. Again, our custodial staff are 12-month employees. Now, as you all know, we are very short-staffed with our custodial folks. But we are looking at 2 years out, and our hope, our goal, and our planning is that there will be a different landscape for our custodial staff and our plant foreman. But you can see we would create a master plan for getting those custodial work done, as well as the big projects in the summer, and then potentially through the intersessions as possible. In the past, we have done some of our work in the winter break, not always, but that is something that has been in place in the past in Deer Valley. Transportation, we know that transportation, we may need drivers during the breaks. I'll talk about that again in just a bit. Our bus drivers are 9-month employees, and one of our bus drivers just wanted to find out, with the summer being 1 to 2 weeks shorter, will that change their work schedule, be considered, and would they be able to work during intersessions? So again, providing that clear communication to transportation staff about payroll schedules and what potential opportunities would be available during intersessions. The next slide on staffing would be campus admin. So our campus admin, high school are 12-month employees, K-8 are 10-month employees. So the question that our campus admin are wondering is, would they be required to work during all intersessions? What would their work calendar look like? Would there be a change in their work calendar, a change in their contract? For staff extra pay, this was brought up also by the parent. Some of both our certified and our classified staff will sometimes have temporary jobs during the summer. Would they be able to continue those temporary jobs in the summer with that 1 or 2 weeks fewer? Would they be able to mitigate that with intercession work should they choose to work? Staffing duties during intercession. So this is also about, will we find staff for our breaks? And that staff would include both perhaps community ed with our enrichment, for intervention, for acceleration, all of those types of things. We know that both our classified and our certified staff are fragile right at this moment. But I am really happy to share with you that we have completely staffed all of our summer programs with our teachers and the classified folks that will be working in those, except for our extended school year staff. But our teachers are finding value in working with kids in smaller groups, as well as the compensation that comes along with that. We believe that within 2 years, similar to identifying bus drivers, that we may be in a different place, similar to where we were prior to the COVID pandemic. And then staff burnout. Using teachers and other staff during intersession breaks could cause burnout, but the goal here is that there is no pressure for any one staff to work during the intersession so that they could take that time, whether it's the full 2 weeks, a week, a few days, whatever their choice would be, for that time to recuperate and rejuvenate. The next one I want to share with you is athletics. So some of the big questions have come up around coaches and staffing. Coaches on break, or coaches not allowing student athletes to have a break during intersessions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Games, planning those athletic schedules for facility usage and staffing. We are very fortunate. Mr. Warner shared with me, and he gave me, AIA has 2 years worth of their schedule laid out. We would know in advance when those games were in place. What he did tell me is already in the past and even this year, the athletic directors in districts will work with each other if a game needs to be changed, see if they can negotiate to find a date that works for both. Transportation, again, finding drivers and monitors for games during intersessions. And then I mentioned before that youth and club sports, the potential impact for fee-paid club sports and fee-paid youth sports activities during the summer and during the school year. So in our next steps, we would work with ALS and our district athletic director to plan for those intersessions with help from middle and high school campus admin, ADs, transportation. We would use the AIA schedules that are provided to us. You can see some of the other considerations that they would work together on, as well as Nick Franklin, our transportation director, work on bidding out drivers well in advance with those calendars. And then for our youth and club sports, providing our school calendar and schedules well in advance to them so they have opportunity to plan. Heat is a big one, and you know what? We're in Phoenix, Arizona, and there's no mitigating heat in Arizona. But one of the concerns brought up would be buses and driving on our buses. I'm very happy to report that all of our buses are air conditioned. A big one for our elementary and even into our middle schools are recesses and heat advisory days. The summer is too hot, and we know that it is hot. The calendar that we are proposing to you would start about 7 days earlier than it would be typical. If there is a heat advisory issued by the Maricopa, Arizona Department of Health Services, what we typically have done in this year and previous years is schools adopt and use their rainy day schedule to keep students indoors. Now, I know one of the concerns was, well, that puts an undue stress on our teachers who provide supervision, and that is so very true. But our schools do have those systems in place. We did check with ALS, and in August of 2021, so just this past August, we only had 2 heat advisory days. And I know only doesn't really sound bad, but it doesn't sound good either, because we really know that heat advisory days are hot for everybody. And that is not only during the school day, but for pickup after school, all of those types of things. So we understand that. And then, as I mentioned, the pickup at the end of the day, it's just hot. But knowing that in August of last year, we had 2 heat advisory days, there is potential that we would have additional heat advisory days in July. We even have heat advisory days in September. Childcare is another area, and childcare opportunities. Are they going to be available for families? What will be available at our schools? How would we provide similar types of options that we have during the summer? And you can see during the 2 years, our community education and communications and community engagement teams, departments, would plan for those intercessions and identify what we would be able to provide fee-based and what we'd be able to provide not fee-based. So there we would look at the potential capacity at different campuses and camps. We know that we will not offer intercession remediation, intervention, enrichment at every campus. We don't do that during the summer either. It would be something that we would look at on a rotating basis each year. And then the cost of childcare, will it increase? When we talked with our general other districts in this, they let us know that in general, childcare costs did not increase for the families that use childcare. The other thing is that we would ensure that our planning team worked on a study of potential cost increases for parents, and that would be something we provide to you as well as our community. When we look at budget, a potential concern is that there will be impact to our budget. So on the left, you'll see, will the intercessions cost additional funds? Will cooling our schools in those 7 extra days or that 1 to 2 weeks extra increase energy costs? When we look at the pay schedule and the work calendar, would there be possible costs involved in those intercessions? And then we've already talked about our classified staff and how we would work with them. So when you look at our next steps, that 2-year planning would involve our fiscal and business services and HR to work on a plan that would also bring in our DVESPA and our DVAA groups so that we could be proactive rather than reactive. Other considerations, we know that once our ESSER funds are gone, we will not have a dedicated source of funding for free programming, and that would be true for summer, and that will be true for intercession breaks. So we would, as a school district, come to the board and make a determination if we needed to make a budget priority for that intervention, remediation, enrichment for our families. There will be added energy costs. There's no getting around it. If we are going earlier into the summer, there's additional energy costs. We do know, though, that in October, air conditioning is still in use in Arizona, specifically in Phoenix, and many of our schools would be closed. So looking at the differential between the cost of the extra days in the summer and the decrease in cost in that October break, Mr. Miglioreno and fiscal and business, his area, would be able to help out with this, but I want to be transparent and say there would be additional cost because of those days. And when we look at our classified staff, we would want to mitigate the potential impact to the hourly classified staff by splitting those pay periods over the intercession so that no break is entirely contained in one pay period. When we did talk with the other districts, that is the strategy that they use. Does it always work? It's their goal, but it doesn't necessarily always work. And they have 20 years, 3 of them do 20 years of going through this. So then that's something that we would work with our classified groups on. When we look at communication, we're looking at misunderstanding, that there is a belief that this is a year-round calendar. The accelerated learning calendar is not a year-round calendar. It is a balanced calendar. With a year-round calendar, those intercession breaks are the same 4 times during the year. For us, you will see in just another slide that our school year breaks are shorter than our summer break. And then for school communication and district communication, again, the communication and community engagement team would work with all other departments to create and execute a stakeholder communication plan. We had one of those when we were going forward with the Friday early releases. we would use that same format to look at our communication so that we had consistent messaging across our campuses, our departments, and our staff. When we look at academics, assessment, curriculum, assignments over the intersession breaks, and intersessions. So will our assessments need to change? And when we looked at this, our teacher collaboration teams work with their common formative assessments. That would not change because that's based on timely data throughout the cycle of learning. So that does not change. There could be a change in the district benchmarks to adjust to the intersession breaks. In general, our district benchmarks try and fall somewhere around that a quarter break, whether it's right before it, right after that quarter break. So we would need to do some potential adjustments, not necessarily in every content area. For curriculum, again, we would need to look at where those units fall, and this is really more for our high schools, but we would look at it across the system so that our pacing of our scope and sequence and learning would fit within those time breaks. So there would be some adjustments there as well. One of the things that was expressed by parents, and you heard, I think, from the parent that spoke, would our kids get to actually have an intersession break, or would they be assigned homework or work to complete? So again, in talking with our fellow districts, there is a clear message that teachers have this 2-week break, children have this 2-week break. Does that actually happen? That would be, again, in that messaging and working to communicate with our teachers that we do not expect work to be completed over the intersession breaks or submitted the day after the intersession break. And that's one of those expectations that would have to be communicated. If we are giving time for our staff to rejuvenate and recharge, we want that same time for our kids. Then when we look at intercession, what will be offered, who can attend, we will plan to offer intervention enrichment childcare, similar to the summer, very much smaller. That could be a week, it could be 3 days, it could be 4 days. That is what a planning team will look at. We're also going to look at the districts that have implemented this, and we'll probably lean heavily on Gilbert, who are moving into this calendar next year. One of the other things that some of our fellow districts have put in place, as well as potential that our staff asked, could we also include AP test prep and credit recovery options during those intersession breaks? And that would give us opportunity for children who wanted to or their families wanted them to have that test prep or credit recovery time during an uninterrupted 2 weeks where that's all they focus on that we don't have right now. We wanted to share with you some of the research. As you know, research will show both sides. What I'm showing you here from these 4 studies is 2 of them are about summer slide and 2 of them are about a balanced calendar. You can look these up. If you want to email me, I can send you further information about each of those. What I did do though is from each of those 4 studies, I pulled out a couple of points, just the larger points in each of them. I'm not going to go over those with you, but this is the research that I found and other districts have used in moving forward with an accelerated learning calendar or a balanced calendar. Similar districts, so I looked at Chandler. We can definitely look at Vail, Queen Creek, Higley, but more often than not, we compare ourselves to Chandler. When we look at the academics, we were not able to look at last year's, the 21-22 information yet from the state. Scott will pull that when we can get to it, but in looking at fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19, between Chandler and Deer Valley, you can see that we're close, but in some cases, we don't surpass Chandler, and that is one of our goals, is to have our children show their academic achievement, what they know and are able to do on our state assessment. So you can see the information in fiscal year 18 in ELA and math, and fiscal year 19 in ELA and math. And then Mr. Warner works closely with other athletic directors across our system, and he did speak with the athletic director in Chandler. And you can read here what that gentleman said is that the 9 on and 2 off they used is beneficial to athletics because it gives their athletes that recharge time for both physical recharge and mental recharge. It does not change the expectation for athletes in general. So regardless of whether the school year is a traditional calendar during winter break, spring break, or a balanced calendar, those students and coaches who are in fall sports, if it lands, it lands. Those who are in winter sports, if it lands during that break, it lands during that break. Same thing for spring break. Again, as Mr. Warner mentioned, though, our school districts' ADs will work with each other if they can find a different date that they both can agree on. However, it's the bottom comment that I'd like to really highlight. Chandler considers it an advantage that their fall athletes are back in school together before any other district are back in school. That they feel gives them an edge. When we look at the calendar we are proposing, you have seen this. It's been in our frequently asked questions. But if you look at the orange sections, those would be the instruction sections. For us are 45 days. When you look at the gray sections, those would be the intercession breaks or the Thanksgiving break. And then when you look at the green, that would be our summer break. So when you look at the comparison of the breaks, the intercession breaks and the summer break, there is, this is not a year-round calendar. This is truly a modified or what we call an accelerated learning calendar. I do want to go back to the main point of why we're bringing this to you for consideration. We just believe that COVID and other illnesses, flu and other types of illnesses, are a fact of life for our education system. The flu always was there. COVID is a reality that we will live with. So identifying ways to decrease our summer learning loss so that it doesn't exponentially continue to impact COVID learning loss and loss of learning opportunity is what this calendar will do, we believe, for students and staff. It gives them the opportunity during those intercession breaks as well as the summer for that intervention and enrichment. We do believe that by doing this, we'll mitigate those illnesses and absences so that we can continue to increase our learning outcomes for our students. I'm going to turn it over now to Ms. Meyer.
Okay. I'm going to now present to you, we have 2 calendars for you to look at for the 2024-25 school year. First is option A, and if we look, you can see that the start date for option A in 24-25 would move back to July 23rd. We would have no break in August, but in September there would be 2 days, the 2nd and the 30th. And then would come the fall intercession from September 30th. Actually, it starts on the 30th of September and runs through October 11th. So there's a 2-week break there, or the 2-week fall intercession. November 11th is Veterans Day, and then this would revert back to the 3-day Thanksgiving holiday. In December, we would have our typical December going from December 23rd through all the way through the end of the week of January 3rd, and then the 6th would be a staff development day coming back on the 7th, so there would be 11 days there. And then MLK Day and President's Day in January and February. In March, you can see there would again be a 2-week intercession placed into March instead of the typical 1 week. April 18th is a spring break day, and as you can see, we would the last day for students would actually be May 23rd. Teachers would have to come back the Tuesday after Memorial Day, May 27th, for us to give a to end school then. So that is option A. And then if we go to option B, again, starting on July 23rd, September and October are the same as in option A. And then we did go back and put in that full week of Thanksgiving because our parents and students are used to it. We have the 2 weeks at the holiday break, and then you go to the 2-week March intercession, our spring break day, and then the difference, if you look, is ending school. The last day for students would in fact be, oh, there's a little mistake there, the 28th of May. And so, as you can see, we would in fact come back after Memorial Day in this option B. So taking a look at the comparison then, it's Thanksgiving break, and it's when we end school before Memorial Day or after Memorial Day, and the reason is because of the Thanksgiving break. Option A, we had 8 committee members support it. Option B, 6, and we had 2 committee members who did not support it at all. And then that is the end of our presentation. Do you have any questions for Dr. Galligan?
Any questions, board members?
I have a lot to say.
Is that a no?
No.
I understand. I'm sorry, what, Mrs. Fisher?
Ms. Ordway, you want to go first?
Mrs. Ordway?
I was going to say, I'm going to read this again and maybe ask a question about maybe email this question about the Thanksgiving break and option B, but not ending after Memorial Day, but I'll put that in an email. So you don't have to answer that now.
Oh,
Thank you,
want the
Mrs.
full,
Ordway.
oh, thank you. You want the full Thanksgiving break, but we don't want to end. Yeah, we can fix that, but you would start earlier.
Oh, I know how that works. I was just saying you didn't have to answer now.
Mrs. Fisher?
The biggest concern I have is that we're given 2 options without options. It's just take this or take this. There is no that. And I appreciate there's been a lot of work, but this is one more thing we're doing to parents, to the community, not with the community. The whole reason we have the calendars that we do is because kids used to farm. They took time off to plant, they took time off to harvest. We're not in that situation anymore. If I were deciding all on my own, kids would go to school year round, all year round. And people would work all year round because that's what they're going to have to do in life. And then they really wouldn't lose anything. But I don't think we've really engaged with our parents. I don't support either calendar when we have not engaged with our parents adequately to say that this is going to be beneficial for them. And when I look at the scores for 2021, we actually very impressively did a much better. We did gain significantly more than what Chandler did. Now, Chandler did see significant improvement in 2021 from FY19, but we, not on this type of a calendar, had an even greater increase than Chandler did in our numbers. So I just think there needs to be a more of a discussion with our parents, a study session. You may have a small pocket of parents that doesn't want it and a bigger parent group that does, and it could be the other way. But even with, like we talked about, the day off for our PLCs, you know, originally something was done to the parents, to the community, and it was not well received, and it had to be changed last minute because it didn't work. Alternatively, we can move forward and just do something to the parents, and then they will happily pull their children and go to Peoria or Paradise Valley or a charter school or homeschool or other options. And when we're already down 3.4% over 2 years ago, I I think that we need to return to the days of having the occasional study session where our parents can actually engage with us. And I don't know, we used to engage with our community and with our parents all the time. All the time. It just completely stopped. And I just, I couldn't support this at all without, but you know, I'm one vote. As long as there's 3, it'll pass. But I just think we need to engage with our parents because they deserve that respect and it's their kids. Like I said, if it were my choice, they'd go year round. But I really think that we need a little bit more parent input.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. I appreciate that you all went to great lengths to address some of the concerns brought up. And I do like the concept of our kids being in school and with an extended year with breaks in the middle for a lot of reasons, mostly because I think it helps the kids, as some of the studies have shown, right, for them to retain their knowledge and provides an opportunity for our students who need some extra assistance to potentially get that, which leads me to my concern about if teachers taking on that extra work is optional, how do we ensure that we have the staff available to assist the students? I'm worried about an imbalance, right? If I have 100 kids who want that assistance in an intersession, but I only have 2 teachers who want to provide assistance, it's not possible, right, for them to service all 100 kids. So, and I know you're talking about 2 years down the road. What and how does that look like? And Chandler's been doing this for 20 years, and one of the other schools has been doing it for quite a long time. So it'd be nice to know how they do that. What does it look like? What kind of response do they get from both the families and the staffing to ensure that we're going to have the resources available for the students who want it, and the families who not just want it but need it, because there are going to be, I believe, parents and families who will who are not afforded the opportunity to take those 2 weeks off. And I know we have the child care option, but maybe it's I want to keep taking math because I need help in math, or I want to accelerate, and so I'm just not sure how to make that work. The athletics is always going to be a problem, or not a problem, but it's an opportunity. When you choose athletics, you don't go on vacation or have the summer that everybody else has, or have the winter. You might go on a vacation, but it's going to be different because that's just the commitment you make to being in a sport, especially in your high school years. The other concern is, and I know I'm not sure I completely understand, so I'll go back and read I'm worried about our classified staff. And while I get that they're still getting paid for 180 days, the ability to have a job over a summer, which is a longer period of time, or even for a teacher, I worry about losing staff under those circumstances. And maybe, again, some of the other school districts who've been doing this for a couple of decades have that feedback. So, and I'm going to process the rest of my thoughts about the survey numbers. I do appreciate that we've surveyed at a couple of different spots, and I think we had some good numbers that responded to surveys. I think that it's important for our parents to provide feedback, and school board meetings are a time where they can come provide feedback, as we had our parent and committee member come tonight. So thank you for coming and speaking. Thank you for your service. That committee, I know, works diligently on what they recommend. So I'm not sure a study session will necessarily get us more response or feedback. So like I said, I'll send my email to Dr. Finch. I apologize. The hour's getting late and there's been a lot of information this evening, and I appreciate the depth to which this presentation went on the extended calendar. Mrs. Ordway, yes, you may.
Just one more thing. When we did talk to the other school districts, is there any way to ask them to go backwards? Perhaps they keep it in minutes or something to see how the parents received it when they first were noticed that they were having a thought about changing their calendar, and then how they processed that information. Chandler's been doing it for a long time. And just real quick about athletics, at this moment in time with the calendar we have, many high school athletes during Thanksgiving, and I don't think there is a break that is called a break for them. And I just wanted to also ensure that if this goes through, that our teachers will not be giving our students work to do over, because I guess if you start something new and you set a precedent, then you don't have to go backwards and fix it. So I'm sorry.
That's okay. And I am going to, as I think about the two for 24, 25, if we were to go that way, I would also reiterate Mrs. Ordway's perspective of not coming back for 2 days after Memorial Day. I just I'm not even thrilled about the option of a teachers having to come back for 1 day after Memorial Day to finish the year. I'm sure there are ways to deal with that, but that is not very appetizing as an option. Okay. Thank you again. And with that, we're at governing board reports, Mrs. Fisher. Oh, sorry. I so apologize. I skipped. Look, I just keep trying to blow through the agenda, and I apologize.
I don't think you're blowing through the agenda. We're going to discuss the 2022 political agenda. Is that where we're at? Bless you. All right, times 3.
Thank you. It's, never just one. Yes, the ASBA political agenda, it's been provided. We've been asked for our input. We can, if we send Sheila our top 5 with an alternative 2 or backup, 2 that are alternatives or backups, she could put that together and provide it in when the agenda is posted so that we could have all that information for the next meeting, unless there's something specific to discuss related to any one of them or any group of them tonight.
Sounds like a plan.
Does that work, Mrs. Fisher? Okay, thank you. All right, now we're on to governing board reports. Thank you, Mrs. Ordway. Mrs. Fisher?
I'm going to keep it really super short. Well, kind of short. I want to congratulate all the award recipients tonight and let them know I'm sorry I couldn't be here, but I was listening as I drove. And I learned some things that, our nurses, of course, are awesome. I knew that because they used to let my son drive people on the wheelchair. Nurses are one of his favorite in school districts, in schools. He was going to be a school nurse when he grew up. Not a good idea. I really love our CTE. CTE, I just do believe is awesome. I was a CTE kid when I grew up. I was in the nursing assistant program and the accounting program, and we actually had fashion merchandising. So I got to design a couple of fairly ugly suits by today's standards. And so I was very impressed by that. The blended name was awesome. I've got to say that was very awesome. However, I did learn that any name that sounds somewhat like Alexa sets off my Alexa Auto. And then Alexa tries to spell check, looks up culinary classes, and then gives the usual, I don't understand the question. So then I have to restart the video every time. But I do want to congratulate all the recipients because it was pretty interesting. Our kids do great things, and so do our staff. And it hasn't been a hard time for our nurses. It always is because nobody wants kids throwing up on them, but our nurses do it and take it in stride and all the things that they have to do. And they get the really good times and the really bad times, and then stressed out parents, and they deserve our kudos. The other thing I want to do is I want to thank the parents who did come tonight and brought up concerns because I can bring them here, but they fall on deaf ears. When I bring them here, I'm told, well, parents didn't actually say that. That's just something you made up to come in and make us and be mean to us. And that's not my goal. I bring stuff here because a parent said it. But I do want to say, you know, one thing that is a little bit of concern. I've been putting together a spreadsheet for Dr. Finch, which I will eventually get to. He knows what it is. But I found a very ironic email that was the very first email I ever sent in to the superintendent of Deer Valley. And it began with, what can't be said in 3 emotional minutes. 3 minutes is not enough for people to come in and give a true opinion. It isn't, especially when the microphone is shut off on them exactly at 3 minutes. And I think everybody knows, everybody who's ever been on that side knows that microphone being shut off on them is disrespectful and an insult. And we do have to do a control, but I'm sorry, 3 emotional minutes is not long enough for them to give their opinion. So I want to thank them. It's difficult to come and do it, and hopefully in the future we can have more parental input. That's my whole report.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Ordway?
Well, I just wanted to talk about how wonderful the last couple of weeks have been. A+ ceremonies, student. Barry Goldwater for their Senior Institute. Our Pursuing Victory with Honor Awards, Barry Goldwater's Student Awards, and all that. It's kind of funny because you see repeat customers. Tonight's, it's just incredible that we have allowed our kids that safe atmosphere, or if you talk about Barry Goldwater, we take risks, good risks, and they're thriving in spite of discord amongst adults, and they just thrive. So I look forward to next week for our graduations, for our promotion ceremonies that may be new to some who've had kids go through their promotion ceremonies on fields. This year it will be cooler and nicer. So again, all the board members that show up, however it is, whichever way we've done it, it's been a very interesting year. We've got Mr. Miglerino Font that has now gone into the Dr. Galligan arena. Then we've got Melissa helping out with the glasses, and we've got our 2 bookends just watching. So what an awesome crew, Heather, part of that crew, and all those in the back. Thank you very much for staying up with us. And as soon as I'm done talking, Mrs. O'Brien will get it, then Dr. Finch, and then we get to go to an executive session. So happy Tuesday.
Thank you, Mrs. Ordway. I would like to make a request that we I know that you and I briefly talked about this, but I want to make sure that it's on the record, Dr. Finch, that we get a legal opinion on House Bill 2161 that was signed by the governor, which allows parents to sue our teachers. I want to make sure that we fully understand the implications of that as it relates to our district and for our staff, all of our staff. So I'm concerned about the implications on what that means for our staff and the impact it can have on staffing. In addition, I would just like to acknowledge the fact that the district has suffered a couple of losses over the last couple of weeks, and I ask those to lift everybody up around you in prayer and for some comfort and peace as we've had staff and students and deal with, like I said, a couple of tragedies. Mountain Shadows A+ School of Excellence was awesome. It was additional their Leader in Me day, which was fabulous. It was wonderful to be back there and to have watched them grown from when they first started to today. I would highly encourage our schools that maybe are still trying to figure out what their program is, that is really an incredible program. For a lot of reasons, and it was just awesome to see the kids do that. Barry Goldwater's senior awards last night and all the academic letters earned by the freshmen through juniors, so that was incredible, all the families who came out. The Innovation Center, congratulations to Dr. Galligan and Mr. Miglerino. What a incredible renovation of a space that will take us into, I don't know, many decades down the road. That building's been there for a long time, and it's exciting to know that students, staff, and community members, families will be able to do and celebrate so much more there. So congratulations to both of you in making that come to fruition. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Finch for a superintendent's report.
Most of you hit the highlights. I scratched them out as you went along. A lot happening at the end of the year. Couple notes as we were sitting here. O'Connor baseball lost 5-3 to Perry in the semi-quarters. OC volleyball won 3-0. They swept theirs, and Deer Valley volleyball lost, unfortunately. But the Suns won as well, I just heard. Yeah, whatever, right? I think track might still be going, but I think most of our sports are heading towards the finish line. Inspiration Mountain, I was there today, and according to Mr. Miglerino, the last big piece of the puzzle, the missing piece, was probably on some boat in Los Angeles. It finally arrived. The electrical, I don't know, maybe transformer would be the right word, the one that connects us to the school. We kind of needed that. We were thinking about bringing your own candles to school. That was an option, but I don't know how he got it done. I actually don't want to know how he got it done. It protects my innocence if I don't know. And summer programming, Dr. Galligan mentioned that. That's something Deer Valley is famous for. We have great interventions, and that is, again, Dr. Galligan has smashed that out of the park and has, as she noted, the teachers have stepped up to help out as we make our interventions and try to get kids caught up. And again, I want to thank Karen and Dr. Galligan, too, for the hours and hours and hours and working with community and our staff. And we've been working actually on this for years. And it's nice to see at least the research done and the option put in front of us. And it's nice to have neighbors around us that we can borrow from to see what they learned, so we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. We can learn on the first lap. And so, again, want to thank everyone for getting us through another year. It's the last week of school's coming up here pretty soon, and graduation's right around the corner. Always excited to do those in the State Farm Stadium. It's always a celebration. See the kids get their diploma and march on.
I do think I saw a crane maybe out at Union. Oh, I see. I was walking this morning and I could see a couple cranes, and I wondered if they were over at our school. Is that a yes, Mr. Miglerino?
President O'Brien, we were swinging some AC units onto the roof at Inspiration Mountain.
That's good news. All right, sorry, I forgot about that. Mrs. Ordway is dying to make a motion to adjourn, so go for it.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting at 10:12.
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Good night.
Meeting adjourned.